Muy buenos días, es un gusto darles la bienvenida al...
Good morning. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the Private Sector Forum that is part of the annual meetings of IDB and IDB Invest for 2025. We're here today to analyze challenges and opportunities for economic growth in Latin America and the Caribbean, highlighting the key role that the private sector plays. And to begin, we will play a video. We are honored to present our first speaker, IDB President Ilan Goldfein. Mr. President, welcome.
Good morning, dear all. Dear Nicolas Real, Minister of Economic Development and Tourism from the Government of Chile, Joseph Siquela, Commissioner for International Partnerships of the European Commission. Good afternoon, distinguished authorities, guests, ladies and gentlemen. It is a great honor to be here in Chile. It is a land of striking extremes, from glaciers in the south to deserts in the north. I was just in Punta Arenas, where I participated in the International Investment Forum and saw firsthand the natural beauty of the south of Chile, of this region's potential. In the Atacama Desert, the driest place on earth, Chile has done something remarkable, growing grapes and avocados, la palta, where rainfall is almost inexistent. Through ingenuity and investment, Chile exports wine produced to the world, and I can personally confirm that the wine travels very well. It's a reminder that all challenges yield opportunity. And today, I want to invite us to apply the same mindset to Latin America and the Caribbean. Latin America and the Caribbean are resource-rich, but they are also positioned for long-term industrial growth. There are several comparative advantages. First, critical minerals. The region holds 2/3 of the world's lithium and almost 40% of its copper. Critical for industries ranging from electronics and infrastructure to energy supply to transportation. And the energy power cost in many of our areas are the most competitive globally. That attracts investment. Also, Latin America and the Caribbean is key for safe and stable global supply chains. And food. The region can produce food to ensure global food security. Chile, in particular, stands out for its strategic position in global trade. Chile has 30 treaties with 65 economies, covering 88% of the world GDP and granting preferential access to 65% of the world's population. In addition to these agreements, Chile is also the largest producer of copper and the second largest producer of lithium. The potential is huge. Chile can generate 70 times more alternative energy than its current levels, or 5 times the total energy produced in Latin America and the Caribbean today. This capacity is vital, in particular for Europe, for example, which is seeking to diversify supply chains under its new Critical Raw Material Act. Chile positions itself as a key supplier of green hydrogen, with agreements already signed, for example, with Germany. This industry has the potential to create 32,000 jobs in Chile, which will strengthen value chains and generate new opportunities for communities, fostering shared prosperity. Leveraging these advantages required a shared vision between governments and you all, the private sector, to turn into a real growth for the country. We need to realize that no one can do it alone. The role of the private sector in development is not just an economic strategy, a tactical strategy, but a common interest that unites the region. Bringing the private sector will create jobs, will strengthen industries, will enhance competitiveness, will benefit businesses, workers, and communities alike. I have been saying, and I will repeat, the more prosperous Latin America, the Caribbean is, the safer and more prosperous the entire hemisphere will be. And this is what the region needs, and this is how we are responding. We are positioning the IDB as the private sector multilateral development bank, but leveraging our 65 years of experience and closeness to the public sector of the region, and this creates synergies for all of us. And we are doing it by concrete action. First, do you know that we lend 44%, we finance 44% of all that we do to the private sector, to companies, through IDB Invest and IDB Lab? And with the trend, we will probably reach parity, 50-50, by the end of the decade. And that's the reason we have IDB Invest Plus. We will have a new vision, an industry-leading business with originate-to-share model, a model where we originate and we share with the private sector. And a $3.5 billion capital increase for IDB Invest that our members approved last year. And IDB Lab, our business model, IDB Lab Plus, which has a business model which is more sustainable, so we can last longer, and more scalable, so the startups become a nation's policy. And a $400 million in grants that we receive from our members, so our innovation laboratory and venture capital arm can contribute to development. But the money, the financing is not enough. Investors need more than our financing. They need the right conditions to thrive. It is critical to create the enabling environment for private sector to mobilize resources and, even more important, to actually invest in the countries. Without the right conditions, we won't be able to mobilize, we won't be able to generate the private sector investment. The foundation of strong economies is an efficient public sector, one that combines the need for regulations and, at the same time, policies that enable and has the flexibility to private sector development. This public sector-based policy creates an environment that is conducive for growth, for innovation, and therefore for employment. This is where the IDB has a role. By improving the policy framework and the business environment, we have loans that we even call it policy-based loans that are exactly for that, to help us generate the policies, generate the enabling conditions so that we can mobilize, we can get private sector investment, we can get growth, we can get productivity and jobs in the future. So the IDB does what? It develops infrastructure that supports industrial expansion and includes public goods, ports, logistics hubs, reliable transportation. It generates human capital by training the workforce and develops skills that everybody could use in the country. That will ensure that we get more productivity and be more efficient. Let me give you examples here in Chile of our work. Through a $1 billion financial facility with contribution from IDB, but other multilateral development banks, the IDB has contributed $400 million of this $1 billion to support the growth of a new sector, a sector of the future, the green hydrogen sector. It is expected that with our support and other MDBs, we can attract $5 billion in private investment by 2040. Another example is a project that highlights the potential of our model, which is a synergy model. Here in Chile, we invested $240 million to help energy companies recover costs from sharp and volatile electricity price hikes. By purchasing nearly all the certificates issued by the Government Tariff Stabilization Fund, we provided liquidity to the sector. And what it did that? It attracted up to $2.16 billion from private investors, showing how we can bridge the gap, how we can bridge between the public and the private. Another example, for example, is from Uruguay. We are helping the government position the country as an innovation hub. We are helping the government strengthen digital infrastructure, cybersecurity, develop the skills, the talent, tech talent in this case, accelerate the adoption of, for example, artificial intelligence. At the same time, we are supporting the entrepreneurs into creating solutions for the population. And we are helping thousands of micro, small, and medium enterprises with their digital transformation. So, having the private sector play a role in development isn't just an opportunity. It's an area of common interest of the region, but of all our members. The story of Chile producing vineyards in deserts and orchards is a lesson in perseverance, making the unlikely possible through determination and investment. I believe that Latin America and the Caribbean can face their own challenges, but with the same persistence, we can unlock the region's full potential, drive development, and improve lives. The IDB serves as a bridge connecting the region to the world, connecting challenges with opportunities, and sometimes connecting one government to the next government. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Presidente.
Thank you very much, President Goifine, for your inspiring remarks. And we now invite the Minister of Economy, Development, and Tourism in Chile, Nicolás Grau. Welcome, Mr. Minister. Good morning. I'd like to particularly recognize Ilan Goldfein, President of the Inter-American Development Bank, Joe Fasichella, Commissioner of the European Commission, and James Scriven, General Manager of IDB Invest, of all IDB authorities, all representatives from countries that are here with us, government authorities, and businessmen and women who are joining us at this forum. I thank you for the opportunity to participate in this important forum. It's held in the context of the 65th meeting of the Board of Governors of IDB and the 39th meeting of the Board of Governors of IDB Invest. It's an honor to host this important event. And take this opportunity to convey our government's vision, President Boric's vision, in the areas that will be broadly discussed in the next few hours. Our government has a deep commitment with sustainable development in our country, with a focus on simultaneously taking on the two fundamental economic issues of our time and of subsequent decades. To wit, to move towards green economy consistent with our carbon neutral goals by 2050, and at the same time to create quality jobs. Those are the two things that our countries need so that populations in our countries can have a good quality of life. Running the risk of being reductionist or limiting my remarks to the economy, would say this problem, the problem of moving ahead on both agendas, is a challenge that is mainly related to innovation and investment to ensure that the current productive sectors can transition to green economies. that we make the fight against climate change the engine of our growth. We need more innovation and more investment in innovation than ever, and we also need innovation and investment be directed in a different sense as the past, and so we need to accelerate and redirect. The challenge is enormous. Experience shows how difficult it is to maintain growth over time. And the few times that this has been achieved in various experiences by countries, this growth has come in tandem with a higher environmental impact. To decouple growth from environmental impact is theoretically possible, of course, but those of us who think that it is possible have the burden of proof upon us, given our history. We need to prove that it is possible to decouple economic growth and environmental impacts. From this perspective of furthering these two agendas to accelerate and innovate, I would like to now explain our agenda. The first element that I would like to highlight in this respect is our agenda to face the delay and the granting of investment permits. At the end of 2022, our first year of government, we embarked on structural reforms for our sectoral permit process. These are all the permits that are not part of the environmental system, with a challenging but realistic goal. In other words, to cut processing times in a meaningful way without reducing our regulatory standards. Just to give you an idea of the importance of sectoral permits in our countries, in a major mining project, as many of the projects that we have in Chile, takes a third of the time is wasted or used in environmental authorizations, and 2/3 is sectoral authorizations. So sectoral authorizations takes most of the time. And in this agenda that we began in 2022, we've made great progress. Our bill for reforming sectoral permits was passed this week with broad consensus in the Economy Commission of the Senate, which was the most difficult obstacle, and it was approved in the Chamber of Deputies with broad consensus, and this will cut timelines by 30 to 70%. It will benefit all types of investments, small scale, large scale, public and private. The question is, how will we achieve this? How will we be able to cut these timelines in such a significant way without reducing the regulatory standards? And we've done this through a series of measures that are broad. First, we will replace dozens of permits with affidavits in low-risk context. Affidavit does not reduce the regulatory standard. It just changes the certification and the verification of the fulfillment of those standards. Just to give you an example, currently, major transmission line project of 1,500 kilometers. Chile needs to get 1,000 permits for change of direction, and so all those permits will be replaced by affidavits. We're just changing the direction of a small irrigation channel, and it doesn't require that high standard. That will accelerate the processing time, but it also will reduce the workload of the National Water Authority, and they can then focus that time on authorizations that are necessary, that entail a higher risk. So that will systemically reduce permitting timelines in the countries. We will also have positive administrative requirements for sectoral permits that have a lower risk. We will also eliminate the frequency of required authorizations. Currently, for many reasons, many sectoral services require a sequence. They say to begin processing this authorization, you need to have a predicate authorization, and most of the times that doesn't make sense to have a sequence. It's not justified in terms of reducing risk, which in the end is what you seek to achieve with sectoral authorization. So our bill basically says that we are eliminating that need for a sequence. They will be permit holders will be able to process these things in tandem at the same time, and that won't reduce the quality standards. They just simply entail that all this will be processed in tandem at the same time. Since we don't have a systemic approach today, we have permits for the same project that have different criteria. So we're going to standardize that. We'll have a one-stop shop for all the different permits that will allow us to have real-time information to improve management approach, but also allow greater transparency and allay concerns from holders. We will have a single agency that will monitor the process, will improve and enhance the system over time, because changes of this magnitude will not be 100% perfect, and they need to be honed over time. Furthermore, we will provide greater regulatory stability, ensuring the projects can request permits under the regulatory framework that existed at the time when the environmental assessment was carried out. Remember that the challenge is not just to accelerate, but to redirect. So in addition to that, we will have a streamlined processing mechanism for strategic projects, thereby cutting times further, in this case by 50% for these strategic initiatives. We're close to final approval for this bill, and the IDB will support us in the implementation of this reform. This reform itself alone entails modifications to 40 different laws. This then leads to changes in regulations after congressional approval. So we will have a lot of work together with the IDB. We will undertake this complex task, and then we will implement this one-stop shop that will require great collaboration across agencies and ministries. And given that we don't have any time to waste, we're working on accelerating investments today, improving public-private coordination and public-public coordination. We have a jobs cabinet, and we will ensure through that we will ensure that investments are not stagnant. In our portfolio in 2024, we looked at 2024 projects that amount to $77 billion. We looked at all the projects. We looked at the different sectoral authorizations that were being delayed by processing. We have very relevant projects: tourism, industry, green industries, agro industries, all productive industries. But the challenge of permits is just one portion of the agenda that we must take on, because it allows us to accelerate. But remember, we also need to redirect investments toward green sectors, green technology. So another relevant aspect of our strategy is to create the conditions for the financial system to create an enabling environment so innovative green projects can see the light of day. So an agenda that allows fostering investment innovation towards green, productive transformation. We currently have a bill in Congress for this. It's gone through the Chamber of Deputies that is under the leadership of Undersecretary Peterson. We will seek to increase the impact and variety of financial instruments for tech adoption at companies. We'll create a new agency for this. We will take an existing capacity. This is what we typically do in Chile. This is not a leap towards the unknown. We will create a new, better institution based on something that already exists, and we will streamline it. This new agency will have the right corporate governance to meet the financial needs of the day. And we will focus on second-tier financial instruments so that we can use diverse mechanisms like guarantees and thereby create favorable conditions so that commercial banks can finance these projects. In Chile, we don't spend too much on R&D, on innovation, and a lot of this is explained by lack of access to financing. And we hope that this bill is passed in the upcoming months. That's a promise to the president for our accountability, so we hope that we can be accountable for that and the other bill that I mentioned before. Another concrete example that is beginning operation is the bond facility for green hydrogen, the IDB, CAF, KfW. The European Union, EIB are supporting our country with more than $1 billion for this facility. 400 million of those resources come from the IDB, so thank you. And the focus of this facility is the development of H2 industry. This is capital that will allow us to cut risk for production projects. These are the largest in our country's history. Current environmental system today, we have 4 green hydrogen projects, $25 billion. So this is twice the maximum that we had in our environmental system before, which the largest before was a mining project. So the facility will help reduce the risk of these projects, but it will also help accelerate the adoption of H2-related technologies for Chilean industries. These will be smaller scale projects, but highly relevant to further the use of green hydrogen in our industries and to gain competitiveness in a world where this technology is gaining traction. In this context, IDB support has been essential to bring this vision to fruition. Technical financial cooperation has been decisive on many fronts. Florencia, I thank you and your teams at Chile from the creation of the original office of the project. With the previous administration, the implementation of sectoral permits, bill, H2 certification processes under the most stringent international standards. Chile is a country where you can make investments with predictability. It has a good business environment, but that's not enough. We know that's why we are working with urgency and with a keen focus to remain competitive. At the same time, we're creating conditions so that new investments and innovations can take a leading role in the efforts to address environmental challenges, the challenges of the future so demanded. Thank you very much.
Le agradecemos al ministro de Economía.
We thank Minister Grau, and we'll continue now with our agenda. We are going to welcome Joseph Sikela, who is the Commissioner for International Partnerships in the European Commission, who will deliver the keynote address. Welcome.
President Goldfein, Honorable Minister Grau, ladies and gentlemen, buenos dias. It's truly an honor to address such a dynamic group of leaders from across the private sector, government, and international institutions. I'd like to thank the Inter-American Development Bank for organizing this forum here in vibrant Santiago. Some of you may know that before becoming Commissioner for International Partnerships, I served as the Czech Minister of Industry and Trade. And in the role, I visited Chile last March, exactly 1 year ago. It's great to be back. During the visit, I learned 2 important things about Chile. First, the enormous potential for cooperation between Chile and Europe in so many areas, including renewable energy and critical raw materials. And second, how much we have in common. Really, at first glance, Santiago seems a world away from my country's capital, Prague. Santiago lies at the foot of the Andes here in South America. Prague lies along the Vltava River, some 12,000 kilometers away in the heart of Europe. Santiago's skyline is defined by modern skyscrapers. Prague is known for its medieval towers and spires. In winter, temperatures in Prague might reach minus 10 degrees plus. In Santiago, as I know, it almost never drops below plus 10. Yet, despite these differences, our cities and our regions share so much common ground. Europe, Latin America, and the Caribbean are united by a commitment to democracy, human rights, and universal values, as well as by our ambition to strengthen our competitiveness and become leaders in global sustainable efforts. Today we stand together on the global stage, tackling some of the most pressing challenges of our times, from fighting climate change to defending the rules-based international order. During my visit, I want to discuss how our regions are deepening ties through the EU's Global Gateway strategy and the critical role the private sector plays in this effort. Let me properly introduce this strategy. President von der Leyen launched Global Gateway in 2021 with the goal of mobilizing 300 billion euros in sustainable infrastructure investment by 2027. The ultimate aim of the strategy is sustainable human development, economic, educational, and health-related. This is what we seek to achieve with our partners. And I mean real cooperation as equals with mutual benefits, building win-win partnerships. Creating links, no dependencies. The main tool of this cooperation is our development projects focused on 5 areas: clean energy, digitalization, education, health, and infrastructure. But beyond that, we also provide regulatory support, enable technology transfer, and place a strong focus on creating new quality jobs for local communities, because it is essential to make the impact of our investments truly lasting. As I said, I see Latin America and Europe as natural partners, and I am pleased to see that our partnership is growing stronger. In 23, leaders from across the EU and Latin America and Caribbean met to discuss our shared challenges and explore new avenues for collaboration. Together we agreed on 45 billion euro investment agenda that not only advances the green and digital transition in Latin America and Caribbean, but also helps Europe meet its own green and digital goals. A true win-win. Just 18 months later, our partnership is taking shape. Today, it spans more than 100 investment initiatives, including several regional Global Gateway flagship projects. Allow me to highlight just 3 of them. First, our partnership on energy. Latin America and Caribbean has abundant renewable energy resources. Meanwhile, the European Union has long been a champion of clean energy transitions. Today, we are working together to integrate electricity markets across Latin America and Caribbean and develop cross-border energy infrastructure that will strengthen both the efficiency and security of energy supply. This partnership will support the green transition and also promote energy independence and resilience against external shocks. Europe has strong experience in building truly integrated electricity grids adapted to renewable energy, along with the necessary data centers and storage. This allows us to maximize the efficiency the efficient use of renewable energy resources. Through this cooperation, we can foster regional integration, create jobs, and most importantly, deliver energy to those who need it most. Second, our partnership on critical raw materials. As the world accelerates its green and digital transitions, access to critical raw materials has become essential. We need them to spin our turbines, power our electric cars, and convert the sun's rays into electricity. But in today's competitive context, accessing these materials and doing so sustainably, it is not easy. Through our partnership, Latin America and Caribbean and the EU are developing sustainable critical raw material supply chains that benefit both our continents. We are working together to draw a critical mass of investors to projects here in Chile, as well as in Argentina, Bolivia, and Brazil. But when it comes to critical raw materials, we all know that the biggest value is created through refining, not just extraction. That is why our efforts focus on adding value here in Latin America and Caribbean, as well as in Europe. We provide regulatory support to stabilize markets and attract foreign investments. We offer training for the local workforce. We invest in critical infrastructure like transport and energy to lower costs and minimize the carbon footprint. And we uphold the highest social, environmental, and governance standards. Third, digital cooperation. The COVID-19 pandemic underscored how critical, how crucial digital connectivity is to our societies. Yet, Latin America and Caribbean still faces challenges in terms of digital infrastructure, connectivity, and access. The European Union, Latin American Caribbean Digital Alliance is working to bridge these gaps by investing in internet infrastructure and fostering innovation ecosystems across the region. The goal is not only to improve access to technology, but also to create the conditions for a truly digital economy that drives growth and enables people to connect, collaborate, and innovate. Our partnership has already led to 100 new joint ventures with participation from 1,500 companies across 68 countries. We are on track to extend the Bella fiber optic cable from South America to Costa Rica, Honduras, El Salvador, and Guatemala later this year. And we've established 2 new regional Copernicus centers, one in Chile and one in Panama, which will play a key role in monitoring and managing natural disasters. The Digital Alliance is not only creating new opportunities for entrepreneurships, it's improving the lives of millions. These 3 examples are far away from exhaustive, but I think they capture the scale of what our regions can achieve together through Global Gateway. And this brings me to the private sector. Without companies, there is no Global Gateway. According to OECD estimates, the annual investment gap to reach the Sustainable Development Goals stands at about 4 trillion euros. No government or multilateral organization can bridge this gap alone. In fact, for many years, global official development assistance has remained at just 0.2 trillion annually, and as we all know, today is decreasing. What does it mean? It means that threats of more poverty, less development, and more instability, it also means that to avoid that, we need to look beyond traditional sources of funding. Business, both large and small, are a key part of the Global Gateway strategy. From green energy companies to tech startups, the private sector brings the investment, expertise, and agility needed to implement and scale our initiatives. Global Gateway is here to work with you to strengthen your projects and make them truly transformative and attractive to our partners. On the financial side, the EU and its member states are leveraging public funds to de-risk investments and make them more attractive to private sector participants. Through a mixture of grants, concessional loans, and guarantees, we reduce the barriers for companies to engage in global gateway projects. In addition, EU member states are the world's largest issuer of green bonds, a crucial tool to drive sustainable investment. Green bonds give investors confidence that their capital will not only generate returns, but also deliver real, tangible impacts on environmental and social progress. We are currently working with Latin America and Caribbean countries to issue green bonds and finance sustainable investments. In particular, we support the development and adoption of taxonomies for sustainable investments to ensure that bonds are standardized, credible, and interoperable across regions and markets. However, the private sector needs more than just access to capital. It needs the right connections to strive. That is why facilitating public-private partnerships is crucial. The EU is committed to fostering collaboration between governments, businesses, and financial institutions. We regularly host business forums and other events, bringing shareholders and stakeholders together to share knowledge, forge partnerships, and drive forward initiatives that benefit both people and planet. We also recognize that doing business across borders can be challenging, so we offer tools to help create the right environment for business growth. Whether it's through regulatory support, capacity building, or technical assistance, we want to help businesses seize the opportunities that arise from our shared goals. Dear colleagues, I had the privilege of serving during the Czech presidency of the Council of the European Union in 2022. It was not an easy time. I will never forget the pressure Europeans felt when Russia's war on Ukraine sent energy prices soaring. And I still remember the Russian propaganda videos showing Europe freezing without Russian gas. After all, we were successful. We proved we can live without Russian gas. But the economic price we paid is a powerful lesson for all of us. A lesson about the need to diversify and to invest in our strategic autonomy. It also reminded us of the need to build strong, resilient partnerships, like the one we are building here today. The Global Gateway investment agenda between the European Union and Latin America and the Caribbean is not just about coming up with ambitious projects. It is about doing them right. And doing them right means bringing a truly transformative impact on people's lives. Thank you for your attention, and I wish you engaging and very productive forum. Thank you very much.
Agradecemos.
We thank Joseph Sikela for his address. We are now going to invite James Scriven, who is the CEO of IDB Invest, to come on the stage and deliver his keynote presentation. James, welcome.
Empezamos con la introducción.
Well, we started with the keynote addresses. Minister, it is truly an honor to have you here.
Joining us today, my name is James Scriven. I lead IDB Invest. And I'd like to start by thanking all of you joining us today in person in Santiago, and also the people that are following us online, and obviously the government of Chile for being a great host. My objective today is to do two things. One, to continue the conversation that our President Ilan Golfan talked about this morning about the land of opportunities in Latin America and the Caribbean, and two, how we can help. I'll try to do it with some images so you hopefully get entertained. First, let me start by talking about us as a group. Ilan this morning talked about a group that has the obsession of improving lives. We have over 660 million people in Latin America and the Caribbean, and the obsession that we have as an institution is to improve each of our lives. We do it by three institutions. The IDB, I'll talk more about that. IDB Invest, I'll talk a lot more about that. And IDB Lab. These three institutions come together to be the most powerful and largest development institution in Latin America and the Caribbean. The three institutions, and I'll double click on the concept of why these three institutions are important to all of you. Business environment. IDB, the public sector part of IDB, works with governments to improve the operating environment for all private sector companies. We push and dynamize the private sector through investments and knowledge, and I'll speak more about that in a minute. And as you will hear from Irene Arias, the CEO of IDB Lab, in a few minutes, what IDB Lab does is invest in early ventures that have the potential to transform the lives of Latin America and the Caribbean, particularly through technology. What we do as an institution, think of us as a bank, a consulting firm, and a private equity fund. We're an unregulated financial institution that has a freedom to innovate around product development and work with financial solutions, with advisory services, bring in and crowd in foreign direct investment in our region, and help the development of our region through knowledge. Impact. In the last 8-9 years since we were recreated, we invested $62 billion into our region. We mobilized 21 billion of co-financing opportunities in our region, over 500 projects. But as a development institutions, our governments and our shareholders are asking us for impact. And these numbers are quite impressive. 5 million MSME financed. We're talking about mitigation of climate impact. We're talking about job creations. So we have this view that it's not only about money, but more importantly about impact. Let me talk about us as an institution. We want to be and strive to be the partner of choice for all of you to invest in Latin America and the Caribbean. We bring local knowledge, regional knowledge. President referred to the more than 60 years of operating and working in all our 26 countries. We bring together the public and private discussion that sometimes is very needed in critical sectors. We bring advice. The solution of development is not only financing, many times is advising our clients to transform their activities. And we have deep industry expertise, and I will refer to a bit more of that in a minute. Local presence, unmatched local presence. Nobody in the world has the knowledge on the ground experience. Today, 50% of our people are physically outside of of the US, physically in our 26 countries, and our growth plan in the context of the capital increase that Ilan just referred to is the objective to have 75% of our staff physically in the region. I talked about industries, and I'm going to refer to this. We operate in 14 industries. We're divided in 14 industries, and I'm going to give a few examples of what we've done. But our biggest competitive advantage is over decades and decades of knowing what it means to build an airport, knows what it means to be able to invest in agribusiness. We've done it all. And what we want to show to our clients and our sponsors is we're practitioners. We're not writing great books. We're investing our own money and helping investors to come in. So with that, I want to show a few examples. Many of you have traveled to Lima, Peru. Many of you have criticized the airport. We have built, and we're weeks away from the inauguration of a new terminal, a new runway, and a new control tower. We invested $250 million and mobilized billions of dollars into a capex investment of $2.5 billion. Another example, Puerto Urabá in Colombia. Very difficult place, obviously on the ocean, but more importantly, connecting a very poor part of Colombia. We did it together with a number of investments, including GIP, Global Infrastructure Partners, and connecting with all the work that we did on the PPP business with the 4G and 5G programs that successfully the government of Colombia has implemented. Another example, El Camino, la Ruta de las Flores in Guatemala. This is a road that if you wanted to take it about 2 years ago, it took you 3 hours to drive. It takes 25 minutes now. It's the source and the bloodline of a number of transport areas. And this, you can see the work that we've done over here. Last but not least, Barbados. We invested a lot of money, a lot of effort. Why did we do this? We wanted to separate as much possible the cruiser lines from the imports of goods into. We financed berth number 6. So this is a good example of some of the efforts that we've been doing. But we're not only looking at past industries, the traditional industries, and that's what brings us to Santiago de Chile or to Chile. Critical minerals, synthetic fuels, agri-tech and food tech through the help and leadership of IDB Lab. Reforestation. You've heard our president talk about our Amazon Forever initiative and the work of reforestation. Data centers. So these are all very new sectors for a lot of us. We already are investing in all these sectors and have this deep expertise. But it's not an easy road. A boss of mine said once, Latin America is not for beginners. And what we're showing over here, for those of you who have traveled this is El Camino del Caracol, the 365 curves it has. It crosses between Chile and Argentina. This shows that this is never a straight line. It's a very complicated way to get from an investor to an investment. And we want to show that we are the vehicle to be able to go from point A to point B. We don't only invest our own money. We crowd in investments from abroad. Over 50% of our investments co-invest with others. Over the last few years, we crowded in over 260 investors or co-investors through the projects that we've operated. Today, we're doing on a yearly basis $5 billion of investments that are coming through us. Some of them are local investors. Over 80 of those 260 are domestic investors, pension funds, insurance companies, locally in Latin America and the Caribbean. But many are from abroad. And you can see the statistics over there, how we're working to constantly crowd-in investments. And we're obsessed with this. We've mapped 500 investors that are willing to or able to invest in Latin America and the Caribbean, and we won't stop until those 263 become 500. I want to show you how we bring and crowd in. The commissioner just now talked about the word de-risking. Latin America and the Caribbean has abundance of natural and human resources, but credit rating and the complexity of building them are not easy. And what we want to do is help you by de-risking those investments. We do it by co-investing, by investing equity into, by providing advice, by bringing in and investing in even CCC rated countries. We bring it by taking riskier part of the investments, either investing heavily during the construction period or even investing in the highest risk structure within the investments. And we also have a wide range. Traditionally, we just crowded in banks. What we do now is have created a set of products tailored to the investors that we have. When we talk about insurance companies, they normally do unfunded guarantees, and we call it the Unfunded Credit Protection Program. Some investors are in the US and prefer investing through a bond. We issued 144A investments there. We've done a number of different traditional loans and securities. So look at us as a wide range of products. And if we don't have it on the list, we can create it as well. So with that, I will try and end with a few examples of what we've done. Liberty in Costa Rica, the telecom company, we invested $400 million through and with 50 partners. This is a good example of how we reached out to a number of investors through a 144A instrument in the US. Another example, Dominican Republic. We invested together with AES from the US in what is one of the largest solar plants in the planet. And we did it by investing through 21 partners together with us, both local and international investors. Last but not least, closer to home, we did a strong work with the Minister of Energy and the Minister of Hacienda to work towards the stabilization of prices, of the volatility of the prices to get to renewable energy. And we did it by issuing one of the largest bonds that was issued, at least in the history for us, our largest. We mobilized $2 billion, and we helped stabilize the price of 29 generating electricity companies over here. And through the help of Itaú, Goldman Sachs, and JP Morgan, issued this over here in the US and more broadly. So let me end with a few images to talk about the opportunity, and Chile is a great example for that. This is Los Solares del Atacama. President just now referred to the Atacama Desert, one of the places that has benefited not only by sun, but also by critical minerals. It's a great example of what the north of Chile provides, but also what the south of Chile provides. We just came from Punta Arenas. This is Torres del Paine, you would recognize. Close to that is Punta Arenas. Punta Arenas is blessed with strongest winds you can ever imagine. And what does that help? Renewable energy. It has a conversion rate for wind farms of about 70%. Very few places on earth has that. So what you find in Chile is the north and the south have enormous potentials to generate both solar energy, critical minerals, wind energy. So I just wanted to end by saying thank you to all of you. We're over here to help crowd in investments into our region and show not only the challenges that our region has, but more importantly, the opportunities that our region has. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Hoy hablaremos de oportunidades. Somos América Latina y el Caribe, una región lista para la inversión, con posibilidades ilimitadas. Aquí, la fuerza vital no solo corre por nuestros ríos, sino que también mueve nuestros océanos, impulsando economías enteras. Una energía que se traduce en proyectos que generan retorno y crecimiento sostenible. Una energía que proviene de la riqueza natural de nuestro planeta y se manifiesta en incontables oportunidades de inversión. Inversiones en una diversidad de industrias que brindan la oportunidad de conectar mercados para alimentar al mundo, para crecer. Las oportunidades que tenemos aquí y ahora son las soluciones innovadoras para los desafíos globales. Por nuestras tierras corre la arteria vital del comercio mundial, un testimonio de las oportunidades que ha brindado la región y que demuestra que somos socios estratégicos en la economía global. Somos América Latina y el Caribe. No somos solo un lugar, somos una comunidad, un continente unido por la historia, la cultura y el trabajo fuerte. Esta es la oferta. Las oportunidades son reales. La invitación es para ustedes.
Bueno, le agradecemos a James.
We thank James Griffin for his address, in which he described exactly how IDB Invest works with the private sector to improve the development we see in Latin America and the Caribbean. We are here on yet another day. We started on Monday, and we've seen great opportunities for discussion, a lot of participation, and discussions around the future of this region, Latin America, the Caribbean. We saw that in the video, and we've heard about solutions and heard conversations and ideas. And this is a good time to remind everyone who is with us in the room that we do have simultaneous interpretation in 3 languages. Those are English, Spanish, and Portuguese. You can get a device for interpretation in the backside of the room. You can simply find those who can help by looking at the badges. We are going to now move into our next segment and ask you to stay with us so that you can make the most of this content. We also want to reach out to those who are streaming this event live. This is a multilingual broadcast, and so everyone is invited to be part of this private sector forum. Everything's going very well, and so let's move into the next panel, which is Shaping the Future, Stakeholders on Impact and Collaboration. And to begin, we are going to ask Cecilia Prieto de Rabasa, Moderator and Division Chief, Portfolio Management, IDB Invest. We also ask Luis Puchol Plaza, who is the Head of Natural Resources for LATAM and Head of Chile Goldman Sachs, to join us. Rosa Isela Ulloa is the Chief Executive Officer of Banco Nacional de Costa Rica. Felipe Cuncha, Chief Financial Officer, BRK Ambiental. Alejandro Garcia Huidobro, President and Chief Executive Officer, Prize. And lastly, joining us here on the panel, we have Tari Galvez-Cincin, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Climate Investment Funds. Welcome.
To this morning's panel on Shaping the Future, Stakeholders on Impact and Collaboration. I am really proud to be moderating this panel and to be at the annual meetings alongside our partners of development for Latin America and the Caribbean. These panelists and their institutions represent a selection of global financiers and clients with whom we partner with to execute the originate-to-share model. Together, we are shaping the future of sustainable growth in the Latin American region. In terms of the flow of the discussion, I will be introducing the panelists to you, and after that we will commence. We have broken down the panel into 4 sections, and a selection of panelists will be commenting and giving their insights into the different topics. And at the end of the panel, we will have a short session where the panelists will comment on opportunities and challenges they see for the region. So I will begin with the introductions. I will begin at the end with Tariye Badegesin, who is from the Climate Investment Funds. So Tariye is a global leader in climate finance, driving transformative investments that accelerate and support a more sustainable and resilient future. As CEO of the Climate Investment Funds, she mobilizes capital at scale to turn climate ambition into action, shaping the financial landscape for sustainable development worldwide. Welcome, Tariye, and thank you. We now move to Luis Puchol, who's directly on my left. With nearly 3 decades in investment banking, Luis has played a key role in expanding Goldman Sachs across Latin America. His strategic vision and deep expertise in natural resources make him a leader in the field. So thank you and welcome as well.
Thank you for having me.
We now go to Rosa Isela Ulloa, who is not only the CEO of the largest bank of Costa Rica, she is the first ever woman to lead the bank in its 110-year history. With over 30 years at the bank, she's been a driving force behind its modernization and financial inclusion efforts. We move to Felipe Cunha, right next to Rosa Isela. With deep expertise in finance and in the water and sanitation industry, Felipe has redefined Brookfield Ambiental's financial strategy, leading major infrastructure projects across Brazil. His strategic vision is driving transformative change in the public services sector, enhancing access and sustainability. And finally, we go to Alejandro Garcia Huidobro, who took his company Price here in Chile from a bold idea to a story of success and to become a global leader in cherries and berries for export. His entrepreneurial mindset and leadership propelled the company to multiple countries, putting Chile in the world's agricultural map. So thank you to the panelists. And as you heard this morning from both our CEO, James Scriven, and by our president, Ilan Goldfein, we have introduced a new model to originate to share. And in the panel, we're going to go into the details of what this model is, how we execute it at IDB Invest, and the impact it has in the region with our clients and with people. Originate to share means that at IDB Invest, we identify, we structure, and we close transactions which we partly finance. And at the same time, we are inviting, we're mobilizing, we're crowding in investors to take on that portion of the risk or of the exposure that we didn't take ourselves. And in so doing, we're optimizing the financial resources, the risk appetite, and the capabilities of the different financiers to match it with the needs of our clients. And this optimization allows us several things. One, it creates a multiplier effect. So we can finance more and more projects, we can obtain more and more impact, but it also allows for sharing of risk, which is one of our biggest objectives to achieve in our new model. In addition to doing the originate to share, we are also constantly introducing new products, new solutions to the risk and to the needs of our clients. And these include both financial and non-financial products and solutions such as local currency financing, equity risk, and innovative advisory services that we provide. So in the end, IDB Invest is fueling sustainable growth by linking the developmental opportunities in the region with the appetite of global investors and global financiers. And this multiplies both our financial resources and the impact that we achieve. So with this brief introduction, we're going to start with Tariye. With the first topic, as I mentioned to you, we broke down the panel into 4 topics. The first one is catalyzing transformation. So CIF, as I call it, or climate investment funds, is a strategic partner of IDB Invest. And we have found that with CIF, we are able to blend resources. So we blend traditional finance with concessional resources from CIF, and this allows us to support projects that have specific needs across the region. So Tariye, in our first question to you, can you tell us from your perspective as a multilateral fund why it makes sense to partner with an institution like IDB Invest? And how does combining concessional funding with market-based funding create opportunities for funding in the region?
Great.
Over to you.
Thank you for your brilliant introduction, and thrilled to be part of this panel today. Indeed, the Climate Investment Funds is one of the largest sources of concessional finance dedicated to climate and energy system transformation. With about $12 billion pledged, we've supported 81 partner countries, almost 400 projects, and working exclusively through multilateral development banks. The Inter-American Development Bank and IDB Invest are key partners for us in this space, and we've been thrilled to be able to drive a great deal of innovative financial instruments to deliver climate action and to do this together. In terms of volume, the IDB is our second largest partner after the World Bank, in that we've approved almost $1.3 billion in commitments since our establishment in 2008 and supported at least 21 countries. Our concessional loans and grant funding has a track record of mobilizing $8 for every dollar of our concessional funds, and this is $8 of co-financing. And it's thanks to institutions such as IDB Invest that come up with the specialty instruments that enable the type of co-financing, mobilization, and indeed models such as the origination to share model that really drives this amount of leverage and mobilization, which is really what we are all being tasked to do. We must do more with less, and we have to use financial innovation to drive more capital to work alongside us. In terms of the role of concessional finance in blending, indeed, we are now called to do more than simply buy down costs, which is what we had historically done with concessional lending. In the 2008 era, when we were established, concessional lending was primarily used to buy down interest costs, very simple, or buy down levelized costs of energy. But we are called to do so much more now so that we can close our over $2 trillion gap. And we've seen that, especially working with IDB Invest, that we're able to use this capital in extremely innovative ways with countries such as, and I'll give some examples. We've worked together with the Dominican Republic, Colombia. We even have a program with Costa Rica. And we've been able to see increasing amounts of co-financing and sharing of risk with our contributions. And so, for example, in Dominican Republic, we have an investment program for energy and one for nature, which we are doing with IDB Invest. Our $85 million energy investment program is expected to mobilize over $1 billion with the sophisticated structuring that IDB Invest has brought to the table. And the instruments have also been really something that can be a beacon for others to use. For example, monetizing CO2 emissions reductions, to be able to put a value onto CO2 reductions so that we can mobilize more voluntary carbon type crediting for how we do energy transition. We've also seen some very interesting use of voluntary carbon markets as well for the Dominican Republic Nature IPP. Something that we're very proud of at the CIF is that we have a renewable energy integration program that is dedicated to transmission, distribution, grid stability. This is the next frontier of renewable energy as we seek to prepare our grids to be able to absorb and deliver increasing amounts of renewable energy. And we have a program with Colombia and IDB Invest, where we're putting in 70 million. And why this is special is that we're mobilizing commercial banks. The IDB has done a program to mobilize commercial banks using the funding that we put in as the underpinning, and you're mobilizing private capital alongside this. So this is a financial intermediary program. And I will close with giving a nod to Costa Rica and the program we have, also a renewable energy integration program that is for transmission and distribution. And we're proud that this program is predominantly private sector. And this is again through the leadership of IDB Invest to build upon a contribution from the CIF into a transmission distribution type of programming that will be driven through the private sector. Ultimately, our ability to integrate smart metering, smart tariff structures, this is really what's going to change the game when it comes to absorbing all this renewable energy and transitioning work going forward.
Thank you, Terry. A very rich experience and working together. So thank you for that. I had one more question for you. In late 2024, the CIF introduced a program for capital markets to make it more affordable, more accessible to your clients. Can you talk to us about that program and how it's aligned to IDB's approach to mobilizing private capital in the region?
Absolutely. I think it's important to also provide the context that in the global financial system and indeed the architecture, there is increasing pressure and increasing need for financial institutions to be smarter with their balance sheets, to leverage more, and to be able to do more with their portfolios. And given the CIF's 16-year track record with a portfolio that has been developed by our MDB partners, including the IDB, we embarked on a process to go into the capital markets, to leverage our balance sheet, front-load our reflows, and create capital efficiency with our capital base. And we successfully launched the CIF Capital Markets Mechanism last year after many years of work with a great deal of support from our MDB partners. The Inter-American Development Bank and IDB Invest were great supporters, and we would like to give our profound thanks once again for your support on helping us take this over the line. We issued our first bond in January, $500 million, but what's more exciting is that it was 6 times oversubscribed. That's a $3 billion order book at a time when if there are any questions about private capital interest in clean technology and energy transition, let us put those to rest, because this bond program had about 60% private sector interest, which was very, very telling. Now, why this is very aligned with IDB is that it is putting forward the concept of integrating private capital into different forms of a blended base. And we are able to leverage on the MDB risk profile, the strength of their systems, their safeguards, their policies, to be able to pull together a book that was ultimately rated AA. And so this integration of MDB approaches, their own risk, as well as our methodologies serviced by the World Bank, has allowed us to achieve a AA rating. And that's ultimately what blending is about. Blending is about, leveraging on your own structures, creating de-risking to be able to achieve a higher quality asset. And that's what we've been able to do together. Why this is exciting for the future is that the CIF has suddenly unlocked potentially billions of dollars of additional concessional capital that we can use to work with the IDB Invest and their clients on really driving energy system transformation. And the type of work we have done in the past can only be turbocharged. And we are going to be launching a new set of programming along energy transformation programs for countries, sector transformation programs for countries, and a big part of this is going to be about mobilizing private capital. And so IDB Invest is well on their way with their new strategy that's very aligned with ours. And so with that, we expect great synergy and great results.
Thank you, Tariye. So this creates a bridge and very impressive results. It creates a bridge for us to start to talk about how we are mobilizing. So we're going to move to the second topic, which is mobilizing capital. And I will begin with Luis from Goldman Sachs. Can you tell us from your perspective as a global investor, how do you see a development bank like IDB Invest originating transactions that are aligned with institutional investors' appetite for emerging market impact investments? And can you share with us insights as to how these partnerships catalyze large pools of funding for projects in the region? Thank you.
Sure. Well, thank you, Cecilia. Thanks for having me here, and thank you for the long-standing partnership. Look, let me start by saying that clearly the role that a development bank like yourself plays is actually pivotal for the well-being and development of the region. I think is by the way that we're able to mobilize capital in size, bespoke and ingenious ways, and two, by the type of projects and situations that you get yourself involved in. When it comes to capital mobilization, what we see, and the role that IDB plays is really make a number of situations that by themselves would not be investable, make them more palatable or attractive to investors. And I think that is key. And then you do that by sort of a number of enhancements, great enhancements, structural enhancements, but also having a skin in the game, which is very important and appreciated. And I'm talking about, and I saw there was a discussion earlier in terms of the different technology that you bring to the table, that clearly, investors appreciate, one, having that sort of ABS structure that we together have adapted in various formats in the region that allows them to have preferred creditor status, withholding tax benefits, but also, by you taking a piece of the risk, that allows that multiplier effect of, call it, 10 to 1, and that actually allows, mobilizing capital in size. I think when it comes to our experience with you and other multilaterals, we in the past 5 years have mobilized $7 billion in the region just in the 5 past years, 4 of which are just related to the PEC in Chile, which has been over a 5-year partnership, 3 different and distinct programs, 4 issuances, and it's really all about the tariff receivable securitization. That has been a sort of industry-wide solution for the generation sector in Chile that really allow to contain price increases for the ultimate consumer and sort of provide a financial solution for the generation companies. So that is clearly our marquee partnership, and I think that's been a great experience, and it had tremendous impact for the ultimate consumer, but it really also allowed mobilizing, as I said, $4 billion to the benefit of the entire system. But it's not just confined to Chile. We work together for allowing sovereigns in the region to access capital in, I would say, preferential terms that otherwise would have not been available to them, like in the case of the Bahamas or the Republic of Ecuador, but also in the private sector, toll roads in Colombia, to name a few. So that is really the experience, and we look forward to doing more. Thank you.
Thank you. We will be discussing the Tarifas project a little more in detail slightly ahead in the presentation. I'm going to move to Rosa Isela. Rosa Isela, ustedes han sido pioneros en...
Rosa Isela, you have pioneered the issuance of thematic bonds, blue bonds, social bonds. Could you tell us how these issuances came about and what role we played so that they would be attractive for local and global investor markets? Thank you. Thank you very much. The Banco Nacional, we've taken on a firm commitment with sustainability and financial innovation, and we've developed instruments that can have a positive impact on the environment and on society. That is how we came up with the blue and social bonds that have been a key milestone in sustainable financing in our institution. What is the blue bond? Well, it was created with the objective of channeling resources to projects that protect and manage water resources in a sustainable way, supporting initiatives like sustainable agriculture, wastewater treatment, and marine and river ecosystem conservation. The Blue Fund was designed to strengthen the economic and social development of vulnerable populations. This is important because with that blue bond, we try to support SMEs that are led by women, to ensure as well that they have access to education and healthcare services. We also facilitate financing for affordable housing projects. Both financial instruments were created to foster economic growth while reducing inequalities and thereby address those environmental and social challenges. But it also created a commercial opportunity which goes hand in hand with the SDGs and the Paris Agreement. Banco Nacional is convinced that sustainable development must go hand in hand with environmental protection, and that is precisely why we were pioneers in Central America, Mexico, and the Caribbean, and promoting these financial instruments to make them available to our clients so that they can have access to these resources and thereby help society. So what is the role of IDB Invest? Together with Banco Nacional, we work in partnership. IDB Invest was a strategic partner in completing the issuance of these bonds. They provided technical assistance and financial structuring support. The IDB Invest and Banco Nacional teams worked in collaboration to ensure that these bonds met global standards and that they maximized their impact to ensure that they had responsible investments. IDB Invest support has helped us tap sustainable capital markets in better terms and better conditions of trust. IDB Invest has also supported a training program to enhance sustainable financing capacity. They provide advisory services, as I said before, on the Blue Bond. Banco Nacional and IDB Invest are working together to identify other potential investment categories. In climate, social issues, indigenous communities, the silver economy, we're seeking these alternatives, and IDB Invest has become a key partner for us because we share the same purpose and values. We want to make sure that this world is ever better. These bond issuances are a function of our strategic vision to become a leading institution in the financial market for sustainable products, aligned with SDGs and with a commitment to bring a positive impact to Costa Ricans. This is also connected to the purpose that we have as an institution, which is to turn dreams into realities. That has been important for us. That means that Banco Nacional always has to support the economic and social development of our country. That is our role as a financial institution.
Because the time is running short, I will move to Alejandro. And Alejandro, could you explain how we're working together in supporting your regional expansion and the positive impact it's having in job creation, in sustainable practices, and other positive impacts? Thank you.
Thank you, Cecilia. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Sí.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation. It's really an honor to be here alongside such prestigious and impactful people and institutions. Well, let me tell you that the IDB is joining us at a very meaningful stage in our journey. Price was founded 19 years ago with a strong focus on growth. Well, we really love building projects with positive impact. And also, we're deeply motivated to be part of this new generation of companies that are reshaping an industry as traditional as the agriculture. So since the beginning, we have been a company that basically has grown through reinvesting our cash flow and through traditional bank financing. And after experiencing significant growth in the recent years, we face important decisions regarding how to keep financing our future growth. As our vision is to build companies that transcend time, we want to be here in the company 40 years from now. We don't want to sell the company like most of my generation. So to do that, to be able to be competitive, we need to cross borders and be able to grow in other countries. So we need a partner that could bring resources at a bigger scale and help us to move to the next stage. And as you know, even if you have great relationships with local banks, the capacity of them to support your growth internationally is very limited. While there's good intent, the reality, at least in our experience, is that the process is really slow and demands a huge focus, on trying to secure those financings. So, in that sense, the IDB model for us is really fantastic, to complement the financing we have already secured, with other banks. And it's bringing the ability to unlock additional funding, that very few institutions can offer. So with the new model and inviting other institutions to co-finance this, it's even more impactful. Let me give you an example of the tremendous impact that this can have. Because this is the difference between pausing our projects or keep going. Okay. Well, this year alone, we, a Chilean-based company, have created around 4,000 new jobs in Peru, Chile, and Mexico. And we expect that number to nearly double next year. And in a production perspective, we're growing from around 10,000 tons of new genetics of blueberries and we plan to scale it to 50,000 tons in the next couple of years. So IDB support is really making a huge difference, for a regional operator like us with global dreams, to reach that global scale. And it's really, really a differentiator for companies that, like us, have more talent than history.
Thank you, Alejandro. So I'm going to turn to Luis once more. As he mentioned, we have structured together, and Goldman Sachs was the lead arranger for the major electricity tariff stabilization operation in Chile. This was structured by IDB Invest hand in hand with the government of Chile, providing a solution to nearly 30 energy generators in the country and crowding in private investors through our B-Bond project. Together, this created the largest mobilization efforts ever for the IDB Invest, so we're very proud of this. And Alejandro, it would be very helpful if you could explain how this private-public model worked well for the appetite of the markets, and if you have any lessons learned that you could share with us of what you saw work well or didn't in this transaction that we can apply going forward in similar transactions. Thank you.
Sure. And I'll be brief, conscious of the time.
Yes.
So, as I said earlier, this has been over 5-year partnership. The aim was containing tariffs to the ultimate consumer in the context of rising electricity prices. That created a shortfall of the tariff to remunerate generation companies. And the objective here was to monetize those receivables for the generation companies. We did that in 3 different ways over 5 years. The first one was the toughest. It was in the middle of the pandemic. And what we did was structure the first sort of securitization vehicle. We borrowed technology from Canada, US, Spain, and Portugal for other sort of similar type of situation, rate reduction bonds. And together with you, we basically designed a structure that would take into account future tariffs being lower to basically create a future cast that would compensate for a shortfall in the present. That was articulated through IDB sort of putting skin in the game, taking a 10% kind of AB structure. We actually bought the remaining and sat on that risk and then distributed to the market. The market was there. It was there in size, and it was oversubscribed. It went very well. What happened afterwards is that some of those assumptions that were embedded into PEC 1 did not work the way they were intended. We had high inflation. We had very high dollar against the peso, and therefore the mathematics did not work, and there had to be a PEC 2. That PEC 2 was structured in a different way. It had a contingent sovereign guarantee for 100%. We structured that. We distributed. It was again oversubscribed. It priced better than a PEC 1, but there had to be a PEC 3, right? And PEC 3, we did it in a different way. We had a lower sovereign guarantee for just 30%. We had some other structural features that actually enhanced repayment, and we went twice to the market in 2024. Last time 2 weeks ago, and now and again, every bond keeps pricing inside the previous bonds, right? So it just gets better and better. I think the takeaway for that is once the investors are there, it was shown through the oversubscription. They were there in price because it's priced tighter. The takeaway is investors are happy to invest and take a long-term perspective in these structures that are long-term solutions, and they adapt to the situations and what we present to them in the context that we have at the time, which is obviously fluid. And I think that that is the takeaway. And I think that more of these structures to address different issues. We know that the market will be there, as long as we structure the right way.
Thank you, Luis. We are going to move to the third topic, which is the sustainable impact and economic growth. So we're going to describe the actual impact that all of these structures and products have on clients and on the ground with the people. So I'm going to turn to Felipe now. Your water and sanitation projects in Brazil have significantly benefited underserved communities. Can you tell us about how the financing structure that IDB developed for BRK Ambiental met your financing needs while also tackling poverty, engagement with micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, and inclusive growth?
Okay. So first of all, thank you for the invitation, and thanks for the partnership between BRK Ambiental and IDB. So we should start by understanding the features of the IDB financing for our project. It was a 500 million financing, a 20-year term, together with Proparco and UK SIP, okay? So, and it was really important because it added up a little bit more of scale to our project in Maranhão, because honestly in Brazil we count on a few limited alternatives for funding infrastructure projects in sanitation in the long term. We have a subsidized financing line in Brazil called Sanitation for All, Saneamento para Todos. We also have in capital markets what we call infrastructure debentures, and we have BNDES and other small development banks. So it's really one additional alternative that we bring to the table with the reputation and the quality of a sponsor such as IDB. So no question that it added a lot in terms of scale and quality to our project. In relation to addressing the social critical areas, well, so we first need to remember that in Brazil, this number is crazy, but we have 100 million people that do not have proper access to sanitation, okay? Mainly in sewage. So, and specifically in this region, in Maranhão, that is part of the broader Amazonia, the situation is even worse. We are talking about a region where average income is $2,000 per annum. And you can imagine how much a project of 500 million reais that represents 20% of the GDP of those locations on a combined basis, how much they can represent in terms of boosting the local economy. And there was an interesting feature of this financing. There is a tranche of $10 million as part of the financing that was sponsored by UK SIP, the UK Social Infrastructure Program, where if we are able to use small and medium local suppliers, we have a reduction in our interest rate, in the interest rate that we pay at the loan. It's a 125 bips reduction, so clearly this creates the proper alignment and the incentives for us to boost even more the local economy. And to finalize, well, this project, this 500 million financing and subsequent the 500 million capex, will be able to improve the sewage service coverage rate in this specific region from 30% to 70-75% in 5 years. So it's pretty meaningful.
Thank you. Thank you, Felipe. We're going to move to Rosa Isela. You have mentioned the Bono Azul y Bonos Sociales. ¿Nos puedes describir?
Can you describe how this improves people's lives and what results has this had for the institution in terms of its objectives and its reputation? Thank you. Thank you. Most countries, Latin America, have coastal areas that are characterized by having tourism and fishing as their main economic activities, but there's other maritime areas where the economy is currently depressed. There's no sources of employment, and that has a social impact on those communities. Costa Rica is no exception because it also has these seasonal flows when there's no demand from tourism that affects revenue for these business people. So the Blue Bond is an opportunity for SMEs to innovate and expand their tourism offerings. Likewise, major companies can model their current strategies to fit a sustainable development strategy to have impact. What can we fund with social bonds or blue bonds? Sustainable construction, tourism, sustainable fishing, sustainable waste management, sustainable water and wastewater management, and plastic management in sustainable ways to contribute to a circular economy. The bond has also benefited our institution because it has bolstered our capital base, and we have been able to expand our credit portfolio into sustainable financing. We've expanded financing offerings for our clients so that they, in turn, can contribute with our financing to protect oceans. We're exploring opportunities to use the blue bond to support young people who want to innovate. We have a representative example of a young man who used a blue bond to produce artisanal salt with herb flavors, hibiscus, rosemary, etc. So the important thing here is we have an entrepreneuring young man who's using best practices. His productive process does not pollute. It's clean, efficient, and it applies proper management of solid waste, protects oceans thereby. He said that he wants to export. He meets all the best practice standards that we need to apply to protect the environment. And we are inclined to continue to provide financing support to this young man. And I think he is in a prime position to export to markets outside of Costa Rica. Outside of Costa Rica, markets require sustainable practices. So this is important for us because it's a young entrepreneur, and also because he applies sustainable practices in production.
Getting into new markets is one of your strategic goals. Can you tell us why this focus on growth boosts your export capacity and create positive ripple effects throughout your supply chain?
Yeah, well, to actually compete, head to head with the world's top companies and become a truly global player, we need to be present in the most efficient, regions to grow and to be able to offer a year-round supply. And for us, in our opinion, LATAM is the most efficient place in the southern hemisphere, to do this, and selecting, the right places, where the most efficient, alternatives are. With that, you can offer an excellent product with relevant volumes. And this is really important to be able to boost your competitiveness, Saying that, our sector operates in rural areas where the impact, of every dollar invested, in the agriculture is huge, We don't operate in the richest places on earth, it's totally the opposite. So we create huge opportunities. And from our experience, the multiplier effect of $1 in this industry is probably one of the highest across the whole economy. In some cases, like over 50% of that dollar that goes as a revenue in the agricultural sector goes directly to wages. And another, I would say, important percentage goes to local suppliers. So this is effectively like a booster for local economies. So this growth actually creates a ripple effect throughout all our supply chain. We have from small local entrepreneurs, offering transportation services, food service, provided machinery rentals, and many, many more, to meet to big suppliers of services like, logistics or goods as packaging. But let me think a little bit outside of the box, and let me tell you about probably one of the most important ripple effects that we see, and we're going to see even more in the future. And this is at a consumer level. Yeah, we want, as an industry, to help shift eating habits towards better quality of life. So on top of the fruit category that we are working, we aim to become probably the next generation, of super snacks. Moving away from junk food, chips or, Doritos or those kind of things, to probably blueberries, nuts, and other fruit. So with this, our industry can have a massive impact on healthcare spending. While today we're considered part of the just agriculture industry, I believe our biggest impact will be in the health sector, reducing spending in diseases created by bad alimentation, and enhancing both lifespan and health span. So we're ready for that, and our mission is to make those superfood more accessible for the whole world.
That's fantastic, thank you. We're going to move to the last topic. We have 5 minutes for that, and this is the topic on crowding in other development finance institutions and donors. For this, I'm going to turn to Felipe. In the structuring of the project that we worked with you, we introduced BRK Ambiental to another DFI, which was Proparco, as well as to a donor fund, UK SIP, which you had mentioned earlier. Can you tell us how this expanded collaboration created value for your operation and initiatives and enhanced the overall impact that your company had?
Well, the greatest benefit for sure is scale, right? So we estimate that Brazil requires 1 trillion reais of investments over the next 10 years to reach universalization in terms of sanitation in Brazil. So we need to find additional sources of funding for being able to complete those investments. And honestly, it was a merit from IDB to bring Proparco and UK SIP for our transaction, and therefore we were able to increase the check and to increase the investments in this area. And honestly, well, I'm very optimistic that on a forward basis we can extend this, because we have hundreds of DFIs in the world, right? They have over $20 trillion in assets under management, and I am sure that sanitation is a natural candidate for any ESG framework those kind of DFIs may have. It's a natural fit, right? Sanitation brings very clear and tangible aspects of development, both from the social and economic perspective. So I'm really confident that we can replicate and even extend this kind of collaboration to other projects that BRK may have, and even other private companies in sanitation in Brazil.
Thank you. With that, we're going to bring the panel to a close, given the time that we have left. And I just want to make a few remarks. The panel has shown to us how the new business model has united all these different institutions in order to unlock the region's full potential, to drive that impact into the region, to seize the opportunities. There's a lot that we can do together, and we would like to incentivize the listeners in the audience that are connected to work with us, to work with our partners, to work with our clients in the region to unlock these benefits that we see. So stay tuned, and there will be more. Thank you very much to everybody, and thank you to the panelists for joining us. We are thrilled to have you here and very honored. Thank you.
Thank you.
Listo.
Gracias a todos nuestros panelistas y a nuestra moderadora.
I thank all our panelists and our moderator for taking part in this new panel during a day that promises to be extremely productive, great discussions on the relevance of the work between the public sector and the private sector, what the IDB does for new ideas and conversations to have. So we'll close on this panel and we'll transition to the next one. which is advancing with productive development and collaboration to address emerging challenges. We have a week full of conversations, sharing insights on Latin America and the Caribbean, private sector. Yesterday, or a couple days ago, we had civil society. Now we have a private sector forum. I'll also remind you all that we have interpretation available. Keep your headsets if you need them. We have interpretation into 3 languages: English, Spanish, and Portuguese. We'll also recognize everybody that is joining us online in the live stream through our application. You can download the application if you need to take a look at the agendas, information on the speakers, content of each of the panels and fora. So shout out to people who are joining us online. This forum seeks to open these discussions to determine how we can collaborate, how we can bring together many ingredients to ensure that Latin America and the Caribbean continues to grow. This morning we had President Goldfein from the IDB, then Nicolas Grau, the Minister of the Economy in Chile, then we had Joseph Sikela as the keynote address. We then heard from James Scriven. Then we had the first panel of the day, Shaping the Future, Stakeholders on Impact and Collaboration, and we will now begin the next panel, IDB for the Americas, Advancing Productive Development and Integration to Respond to Global Challenges. And to begin the session, we would like to invite Fabrizio Operti, Interim Manager for the Productivity and Trade and Innovation Sector IDB. We'll also like to invite Matthew Swift. He's the co-founder, president, CEO of Concordia. Nuria Villanova, president of the Ibero-American Business Alliance Council, is also joining us. Then Neil Harrington, senior vice president for the Americas of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce. Finally, Rosario Navarro, president of the Confederation of Chilean Industry. May you all be welcome. Very well.
Very well. A good morning to everyone in the audience here with us in the room. And also, I'd like to acknowledge everyone who is linked to this broadcast via social media and online. It's great to have this conversation. It's also an honor for me and a privilege to be on this panel to moderate this conversation between friends of Latin America, of the region, of the IDB, who are all with us today, which reflects really the commitment they all have to our region. As President Ilan Goldfein said this morning, the private sector is the driver for growth in the region. It drives productivity, sustainable development, and it is absolutely vital to take on challenges, but also to really make the most of opportunities, which is something we'll focus on in this panel. We'll talk about opportunities. As a matter of fact, the program that we're also going to talk about, Bid for the Americas, is exactly that. It's an initiative that seeks to promote opportunities for businesses in the region, mainly in non-borrowing countries of the IDB. We're talking about 22 countries that are from all over the world, and we set out as a goal with that program to create opportunities focusing on 3 specific things. The first is trade and investment, second is public procurement, and third is co-financing. As these opportunities all come together, we can see what the bank is doing to enhance that, the loans, the knowledge, and everything that the bank has in its offering, financial services and content that's provided to the region. But to be more specific, I'd say that since this program launched in September of 2023, this was under President Ilan Goldfein, We look at participation of businesses of the member countries that are non-borrowing in the actions that are financed by the IDB. We saw an increase of 21%. Our matchmaking for businesses, these one-on-one matchmakings, saw a 64% increase with businesses in non-borrowing countries. And that generated more than $800 million in business transactions and projected business. And co-financing transactions from IDB Invest with North America, Europe, and Asia increased by 45%. So we can already see that these kinds of initiatives and programs are bearing fruit, are creating these opportunities, which is what we'll talk about in this panel. And let's begin with Rosario Navarro. Welcome. Welcome to your country. President of the Confederation of Chilean Industry. And let me begin with a question, Rosario. What kinds of opportunities are there for Chilean businesses once they're able to engage with global players and businesses using platforms like Bid for the Americas, for example? Fabrizio, thank you very much. It's really an honor to be here on this panel with my fellow panelists, core friends whom I've known for a long time. I should say there's a challenge. We are experiencing very complex times, and a small economy like Chile has what I believe is a vital ally to expanding into new markets. And that's why I believe Bid for the Americas not only leverages the pillars you talked about, public procurement, making more bringing more transparency to this work that is being done, but also opportunities with new markets. And so having this partnership, having this platform that gives access to bidding, to procurement processes that are all very competitive, that's a great tool for Chile and for all of the businesses in my confederation. We see a lot of competitive advantages in industries like food tech, for example, clean energy, sustainable mining, and being able to gain access to and be part of consortiums and calls for bids and these different opportunities. I think that boosts our activity, but also really stimulates this idea that things can be done better, that we can all aspire to have international standards met in our countries as well. And the platform, as you were talking about, has this as one of its benefits. We also have economies and industries that are more on the emerging side of this activity, and so they're just getting the lay of the land, and this can help improve the export capacity for things like green hydrogen, tech services, where there's also potential for growth. And I would say that the key challenge faced by businesses right now is having access to international standards, to regulatory standards, and financing opportunities, and understanding exactly where demand is coming from. And so this platform, having it all under this one umbrella, all very well structured, that makes that possible. Public procurement is another area, you mentioned this. The ability to actually put in your bid for getting a contract where we can show up as a consortium. We're talking about over 12,000 contracts right now that we can see on the platform Bid for the Americas. And so we have this effort to open up to the rest of the world and access to international bidding. But I think there's an additional point here, and it has to do with digitalization and technology adoption. That also gives us access to these solutions. It helps us understand how to reach these new platforms. And I do believe that if we continue down this road, I am fully convinced that we're going to not only find ourselves in new markets, but we'll also finally start to tap into this desired growth that we want to have in Chile. We see Chile that has good growth, but not the growth necessary to achieve the targets we set for ourselves, which is why gaining access to these platforms gives us more of that boost to export both goods and services for the better of our economy. Thank you very much, Rosario. Thanks for getting us down to the meat of the topic that we wanted to talk about today, business stimulation, regulations, and a business-friendly environment. Of course, that's all part of IDB's commitment in the region. And this is a great segue to the question I have for Neil Harrington, Senior Vice Commerce. When it comes to the strategies that businesses in the U.S. are bringing to the region and in all of these different opportunity industries, can you talk to us a little bit about that? Thank you very much, Fabricio. And first of all, thank you for inviting me to be here on this panel. It's truly a privilege to be flanked by such great friends. I think I'll focus on perhaps 4 or 5 very quick points, but do want to conclude by saying that the IDB is perfectly qualified to actually handle and manage this initiative as a single window. You have all of those resources. We see that the exports and investors are being educated through this. I think that this is in your day-to-day as a bank. You do this through Connect Americas and through other platforms, a matchmaking effort. And you talked about this in the improving statistics, the 61% increase, as you mentioned. I think that more than anything, this is important for small businesses that have to face barriers to trade and access to markets at a global level. Also, when it comes to development finance, it's another key area. We have all heard what has been said here, what James said, perfect and excellent presentation what IDB Invest is doing, the absolutely vital role it plays, but mainly in actually getting small businesses into value chains, in helping them find investment opportunities. There's another very important point here, and James mentioned this too, de-risking, being able to actually mitigate those risks that small businesses tend to see have bigger consequences for them than for other larger businesses. Also, when it comes to stakeholders and engagement, that is something that we see in ABD, the America's Business Dialogue. It's a platform for public-private engagement. I think it's the most efficient in the entire region, as I see it. Also, deepening trade relations. I think that's very important. Obviously, the United States enjoys trade relations with the entire region. But I think it is really important to underscore that the trade policy is really important as well. And the current trade policy, in our opinion right now, is just wrong. So it is not the way to unite the region if you are carrying out a trade war. And so the Chamber believes that the U.S. government needs to cease and desist with its current strategy. Lastly, the rule of law, just making sure that that's strengthened. And in this region, Fabricio, we have been working for over a decade on the rule of law, and that has always been the biggest impediment, especially for small businesses and for anyone trying to do business, really. And so priority needs to be given to transparency, to accountability, and everything having to do with legal certainty. And I'll stop there. Thank you. Thank you very much, Neil. Great. And so we move from the private sector in the U.S. to the Ibero-American private sector with Nuria, who's the president of Ibero-American Business Alliance Council. Welcome, Nuria. Talking about opportunities in the value chains and synergies with Ibero-America and the region. Can you talk a little bit about that? Well, I would talk about 3 major opportunities. One has to do with partnerships, the second, investment, and the third is dialogue with government. Our business council is made up of 320 representatives. They are the CEOs of the biggest companies in our entire joint region. And so we have the president of our council is an active member that always advocates for growth in Ibero-America. We are part of a larger world. We're aware of that. We understand that now the governments in countries have more challenging situations. Governments are having an increasingly hard time engaging with each other. We see a lot of division. And from an institutional perspective, we see more changes now than we have in a long time. And so I think that that creates a big opportunity for businesses to carry forward that effort. The biggest business leaders in our countries do have influence in our countries, and so that needs to be used and leveraged. The partnerships between big business leaders can help keep dialogue going, even when the dialogue between governments seems to be increasingly hard. The second aspect I would highlight is investment. Integration is being built, and I always say that Iberoamerica only exists because the businesses allow it. The businesses that used to be called multilatinas and the Spanish businesses that started to invest in Latin America, that's what we used to talk about. But now I think we need to talk about multi-Ibero-American businesses. They're the ones growing in the region. We see, for example, a Chilean business with a footprint in Peru, in Colombia, in Argentina, in Mexico, in Spain. When that happens, that makes integration into value chains much easier. The role Spain is playing also is something to highlight. For many years, it was where investments are coming from, and now Mexico is the fourth largest investor in Spain at a global scale, and countries like Brazil, Argentina, Chile, Colombia, and Peru, they're also now turning towards Spain. Why? Well, because almost all of the investment coming from Latin American businesses into Spain are seeking to grow. Where? In Europe, in Asia, in Africa, and even in the United States. There is here just the perfect storm. We also see Middle Eastern investment in Spain that's growing a great deal, UAE, Qatar, etc. And it just so happens that these are businesses that also have, for the most part, investments in Latin America. And so Spain is a sort of springboard towards Latin America and the world, but also for the world to turn towards Latin America. And so I think that that is work that requires our full effort and our full hearts. Another factor is I believe that IDB is strategic and absolutely essential when it comes to dialogue with governments, which really is essential because there are investments that aren't happening because of a lack of trust. Our slogan is create, believe, and grow. Without trust in countries, businesses are not started. And if businesses aren't started, there is no growth. And as businesses, I believe that in our hearts, as part of our goals, we need to focus on business growth, but also social impact. And that is because if society is not doing well, if people are losing hope in a better future, then the system is simply not sustainable. And so create, believe, and grow in a partnership with great and major investment loans like you are. That's all a great way for the future. Thank you very much. And talking about this springboard, I was able to launch the Bid for the Americas program in Spain and from Spain to the rest of Europe. And we have gone to the chambers of commerce in different countries. We have seen them join us in what we do. For those of us who are listening online, you can very quickly look this up online and you'll come across apps that show these opportunities so that these springboards can truly materialize into concrete opportunities. And the public goods part financed by the IDB all foster this kind of private sector activity. And it is definitely something that is needed, so you're playing an important role. And now talking about dialogue, Matthew Swift, who is co-founder, president, and CEO of Concordia. We'll go to English now.
What role, Matthew, do you think global convening platforms, and we're talking about dialogue and cooperation, like Concordia, play in advancing economic integration, and how might the sort of the high-level discourse lead to specific trade and investment opportunities in our region, in Latin America and the Caribbean?
Of course. Well, thank you very, very much for having me. It's an honor to be here. It is also a great honor to be in Santiago. What a beautiful city and what a beautiful country. My congratulations as well to the Inter-American Development Bank, IDB, for convening this. So I'm going to start with one big thing that I am seeing from the different global convenings that Concordia has held. We are entering very, very much a new era. And if everybody in this room walks away with one thought from what my remarks and intervention in this will be, I want you to think about the concept of the New World Order, as confusing as it might be, the news that's changing every single day, the speed at which these things are happening. But what we're looking at from Concordia's perspective, and I'm seeing it firsthand at our different meetings, is we're entering this era of radically transparent self-interest. Now, let me say that again, radically transparent self-interest. And so what does that mean? As I can see it, whether it's from a company or it's from a country, if it's policy or if it's simply a business opportunity, that era by which it will be seen as not only acceptable, but to some extent promoted that you pursue your self-interest is going to be who wins in this environment. And I think people have an option. They can either lean into that or they can take a step back from that. And the reason convenings are so important is because it is a critical opportunity for people to step into it, to lean into that. Change is not always a bad thing. Difficult conversations are not always a bad thing. I think that your comment on trust was incredibly important. There's no question that trust for certain institutions globally is at an all-time low. But I also feel that if institutions lean into this change and lean into the difficult conversations taking place, which frankly can't really happen through the news media, they can't really happen on Zoom or on Microsoft Teams, they need to happen at forums like this. And so on the convening front, I think convening and coming together in person is a critical moment and opportunity to navigate what is a dramatically changing global landscape, some of which is in our control, and some of it, let's accept it, is not in our control.
Thank you. Thank you for your comments, Matthew. And de eso se trata.
And that's what it's all about, actually creating spaces for cooperation, and not only virtual platforms or in-person platforms. This week we've had people from all over the world. We had a really interesting business forum in Punta Arenas earlier this week, and then on Monday we're also going to see other projects on green hydrogen and renewables, all key for the development and growth in the region. So Rosario, with that, let me move back to you. Wondering if you can perhaps talk a little bit about innovation and how this public-private partnership can also lead to more innovation as you think about local businesses. So how we're able to also foster that aspect of it, which is important for international investment. That's a great question. I love that question. I think it's absolutely key for there to be cooperation between the public and private sectors. We now know that no one can take on a global challenge alone. So for local businesses, it's absolutely key to know that when we cooperate and work together with the public sector, we can actually help boost innovation. There are 4 areas that I think are key for this. One is infrastructure. The second is how we're actually developing the talent we need to innovate. Third, where the real innovation capacity lies in local businesses. And of course, the fact that all of this requires access to financing. And I think those are the 4 pillars. I'll use very concrete examples. Fabricio said, sure, but let's land this plane. What are we actually doing? Well, with the IDB, we have seen very specific projects in Chile for the last 6 years. We've been working on a project called Digital Talent, Talento Digital, P initiative. So FOFA has been part of it. The government has been part of it. We've been able to find what the key skills gap have been. We've looked at modules and camps to train and get people involved in Chile so that they can be ready and actually be part of the workforce from a digital perspective. The other element also, it sounds important. I mean, you mentioned it's important, and it's having that single one-stop shop, right? So when you have the SPS advances that we've seen here, that allows local businesses to open up to other markets like the U.S. market, reducing costs and processing times. We have a local challenge here, and that is not only how do we export raw materials and commodities, but also tap into key things like lithium so that we can have an international investment come here so that we can have manufacturing capacity here and build more on that. Also wanted to mention that we are working on specific projects that have to do with using AI. There is a pilot we're working on, developing it with the IDB, with strategic alliances as well, so that we can bring local small businesses closer to access to AI and seeing how that can boost productivity in the SME sector, which is lagging further behind. We also have the issue of access to financing. As we know, that always needs to be monitored. Local capital can sometimes be very constrained. And in order to gain access to global value chains, it doesn't just happen. We know that. We need to have alignment between public policy. We need a consistent engagement with the private sector and government, and also the investment that we are seeing with the kind of infrastructure that is both physical and digital, and making sure that 5G gets off the ground so that the Internet of Things can also take off. I believe these are all virtuous partnerships. The IDB has been an absolutely key partner for Chile, and we appreciate it. We believe that that's going to give us the opportunity for the quantum leap. I do fully believe that Latin America is the driver for the future. Thank you very much, Rosario. Thank you. And thank you for landing that plane, and you used a ball analogy. You scored a few goals. So again, in talking about what this means practically, right? So the businesses that are going to be investing in the region, many of you, we have programs that have curricula for these training workshops actually developed by you, by the businesses, by those who are on the ground. And so the incentives, the regulations, the Minister of Economy of Chile was talking about permitting and those issues, and we're working on that in Chile and the entire region, and those kinds of steps are very concrete. And Neil, now I'm talking about concrete things. What specific sectors and opportunities do you see for investment for global businesses and for U.S. businesses in particular? Well, I have to say I fully agree with Rosario and with her optimism. I want to focus on emerging technology and what I think is needed. That goes for the sector, for the business leaders, for the small businesses and entrepreneurs, digital services, for example, renewables, AI, and everything that is going to be driving the economy in the future. Both Rosario and I raised the issue of access to financing. I think I'll raise it yet again. And that is because it's important for any business, but it's even more important for entrepreneurs, for startups. I mean, access to financing is everything. Trade facilitation is also key. And the tools that actually make it possible to level the playing field for entrepreneurs, all of that's important. And why? Because Fortune 500 companies all have some sort of back office that handle the processing of the administrative things, permitting and licenses. But something else that you raise here, but through digitalization, we can level that playing field a lot more. Regulatory and policy support, very similar to trade facilitation and investment. SMEs and entrepreneurs need access to more competitive bidding and access to public procurement opportunities. PPPs are also key, and that's because it really is a win-win for governments and the private sector. And I'll end with the issue of knowledge and technology transfers. Absolutely vital for the region. And we at the U.S. Always want to say that you can count on that from us. So we're going to hear soon from Irene Arias, who is the CEO of IDB Lab. And she'll talk about the work the bank is doing in that area as well, which is also really important because it ensures that the technology that is in other parts of the world can also become a local technology. Great, thank you very much. And I'll go back to procurement, which is one of the key aspects of Bid for the Americas. We are making information on public procurement from the IDB to making sure that it is user-friendly. We're using apps. We're using a number of different tools to make sure that everyone can participate in these different bids. And that's important. Nuria. As we think about opportunities with Iberoamerica, if we can just zoom in, if we can more specifically talk about the industries, the emerging industries, the kinds of opportunities you're finding in the region. Well, I think agro-industry, there's an opportunity. I think there is a need for a technology transformation of the agricultural sector, and the promise of having Latin America become the breadbasket of the world, the major food producer for the world, that needs to actually materialize. Tourism, that partnership with Spain needs to be worked on. Only 47 million people live in the country, but we welcome 100 million visitors every year. We also need to make sure that we're providing support so that there can be even more great places to visit in Latin America. Education is another area. We are still educating with a look towards the past and not necessarily looking forward towards employability in the future. I think that's an important element. Now, I do want to switch from talking about opportunity to risk, and we'll talk about what is going to be our strategy for this year, and it's going to be the risk of the major blackout. I believe that we're still working with yesterday's energy in mind. We talk about the opportunities in clean energy, when we should really be talking about need. I don't know if you remember the big discussion from the major phone companies, where Netflix and the platforms first were getting off the ground. All of this was leading to major collapses of the systems, and that can happen with AI. We are seeing the multi-million-dollar investments that are going into some situations simply because there's no water, there's no energy. In certain markets, there isn't enough energy available for what is needed now. If you add to that AI consumes a great deal of energy, then what we may be seeing are cities that will be in a blackout for a few hours or simply lack enough energy. Or we could have AI be what blacks out. Countries that cannot compete with the world because they cannot use AI or incorporate it to the degree that they need it. That is the water aspect, the mining aspect, technology aspect that I was referring to. We're still working on things, but looking at it from the perspective of one country, whether one country, one community is willing to allow for a mining project to kick in. But mining is absolutely strategic nowadays. If we really want to stay away from that, what is a really real possibility, this risk of the blackout. And we need to tap into all of those opportunities that we have. And this is why our major focus will be working on these opportunities, agro-industry, tourism, and education, but also starting to advocate so that we don't find ourselves in that major blackout, which means not being ready for the mining, water, and energy issues that we have right now. Not in the future, but now.
Reflexiones. Thank you, Nuria, for those insights.
And going a little bit more specifically on the dimension of business intelligence and how can that conduce to opportunities, specific opportunities for private sector investment. What are your thoughts on that?
No, thank you for that. And let me start first with what I see as the challenge for the region, and then I'll talk about what I see as the opportunity. I think for Latin America, and I want to make this point very clear because I'm very proud of this. Concordia is a New York-based, US-based institution, but when we decided to branch out globally, we didn't pick Europe or Africa or the Middle East or Asia. We picked Latin America as the first site of our first regional initiative, and we picked Bogota, Colombia as the first site of our first summit outside of the United States. And the reason we did that was two things. One is I think this is a region, Latin America and the Caribbean is a part of the world that for years has, frankly, been overlooked by the global business community. And I think that that has to change, and it has changed. But the second is that the opportunity here is remarkable. Now, you asked, though, from a business intelligence perspective. I think the biggest challenge that I hear is there are so many preconceived notions by CEOs all around the world about Latin America and the Caribbean. And frankly, those are not particularly fair because so few of them have actually spent time in the region. And so this goes back to the convening component. What's important is that we're not operating in echo chambers, but instead we are bringing people from all around the world to see what is possible here. Now, the challenge this region has to work through is no different, frankly, than the challenge in countries all around the world, which is the pendulum swing from a governmental perspective, from a policy perspective, is so dramatic. I mean, Neil and I will tell you, as you know all too well, because you're in Washington as well, it's not even every day, it's every 20 minutes something changes from a policy perspective, and that tis not a good environment for business.
No.
But that doesn't mean there are not opportunities, and I see, and I predict, and some might laugh about this just given the news, but I predict a bit of a golden era for the Western Hemisphere, and I'm excited to see it.
Thank you, Matthew. Muchas gracias a todo el panel.
I thank the entire panel for their insights. The Inter-American Development Bank will continue to act as a bridge for opportunities in the region. You covered a number of important issues on our agenda, the IDB's agenda in the region, so let us all thank this panel with a round of applause.
Muchas gracias, Fabricio. También a todos los.
Thank you, Fabricio. I thank all the panelists for this great discussion. This was Bid for the Americas, Advancing Productive Development and Integration to Respond to Global Challenges, and we will. There are a number of opportunities, business opportunities to foster the economic growth of the region, which is what we have been talking about during the day. It's important to foster trust in countries, to develop public policies that will lead to more investment and innovation in our region. We thank panelists for their remarks and sharing their experience. We will now begin a new session, Venture for Development, Catalyzing Innovation Across Latin America and the Caribbean. We will begin this session with a video. We will then hear from Irene Arias Hoffman, CEO of IDB Lab, who will make a special presentation.
Dario en el Caribe, una agricultora en los Andes y un repartidor en Centroamérica. Sus vidas han mejorado gracias a innovaciones impulsadas por BidLab, el brazo de innovación y venture capital del Banco Interamericano de Desarrollo. En BidLab, canalizamos el poder del emprendimiento y la tecnología para crear oportunidades para quienes más las necesitan. Fomentamos la escala de nuevas soluciones para cerrar brechas sociales, promover la resiliencia ambiental y aumentar la productividad empresarial. Lo hacemos brindando financiamiento crítico, generando conocimiento práctico y forjando conexiones globales. Con todo esto, desarrollamos startups de alto impacto y los ecosistemas de innovación que necesitan para prosperar. BidLab, innovación que mejora vidas en América Latina y el Caribe.
A todos
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here once again with all of you in these seminars and Private Sector Forum. As you heard from the video, I want to spend the next 7 minutes providing an update or an introduction on IDB Lab, this innovation and venture capital arm of the IDB Group. First, our raison d'être, which is to harness the power of innovation, entrepreneurship, and disruptive technologies to provide effective and transformational solutions to these challenges so that we can have a deeper and greater impact to improve the lives of the poor and vulnerable who lack formal access to many services. We've seen this in the area of fintechs that have created so much space to include non-bankerized people. That's the first element. The second one is to foster new markets, markets that may not even have a name yet at this point, but those are the frontiers, the cutting edge that will help us address one of the main challenges that Latin America and the Caribbean has, which is low productivity. And number three, to use these tools to foster biodiversity and climate resilience. We know that in the absence of these science and technological solutions, we will find it hard to address these major challenges. We don't limit our response to financing, though we have financing among our tools, but we also use knowledge and connections. Connections like we see in this type of opportunity where we can bring stakeholders together and we can connect supply and demand, ideas with financing. Sometimes it's difficult to make this connection because the innovation ecosystem is oftentimes fragmented, so we can play a role in better articulating the innovation ecosystem. We have these three layers here, and they show how we deploy these tools, financing, knowledge, and connections. First, as Neil just said, we need to create an enabling environment for innovation, and you will hear Jose Miguel de Benavente in the upcoming panel to see how this has been put in practice in Chile, how public policies have had a specific impact in laying the groundwork so that innovation can prosper and scale up adequately. Then we have the second layer, which is to foster innovative solutions with flexible and custom-made financing for each stage of entrepreneurship. You'll hear from Jasmine, I think, and Camilo in the panel on how we integrate the second layer. And I think we work with them to make investments in venture capital. And since the 90s, since the IDB lab was the myth, we have been able to back more than 120 VC funds that are active. Today, we are currently active in more than 60. That's reaching more than 600 endeavors that are part of that portfolio in a direct way. And you'll see that with the venture that Camilo will explain later on. And then we have the third layer, which is to scale solutions up. So from the stage where we design operations, we need to think about the trajectory to scalability, and we need to connect entrepreneurs and venture capital with investors that can go along with these ideas, these endeavors in stages of low risk. We have worked in health and technologies. We have the financial sector that is more mature in this sense, like with fintechs and digital assets, the entire sector. Natural capital and resilient solutions and basic infrastructure are also part of these efforts. This connected with the issue that Nuria was talking about on the region as a powerhouse in the agricultural sector. But under these verticals, we work to specifically understand the concrete problem that we want to take on in the healthcare sector. It's not healthcare at large that we want to take on. It's specifically how technological solutions are taking on or addressing services for people with chronic diseases or people who live in rural areas. So we need to understand the problem. We need to fall in love with the specific problem and then bring the best available solutions from the market. How do we see this VC market for the industry? Well, it's had its ebbs and flows, and such is the nature of the sector. It had a high peak in 2021, attracting more than $16 billion in investment. IDB Lab was part of catalyzing a portion of that investment. That was the result of the macro context that we are familiar with, interest rates, et cetera. But it's dropped, but we do believe that the next decade will be a positive one, and we want to be a part of that. We see great potential because the results are there, and we want to attract more local investors, family offices, institutional investors from outside, and through initiatives like IDB for the Americas that Fabricio just mentioned, to show that we have the best unicorns in Latin America and the Caribbean. We can see that they have market capitalization levels that exceed all the traditional players in these sectors. And we see that in the case of Mercado Libre and Nubank in e-commerce and the financial sector, respectively. We're seeing this disruption in other sectors, and we want to support it in these sectors as well. And as we said yesterday in the AI panel, we want to support R&D plus I elevated to the AI, and this has great potential for development. And you'll hear more about this in the conversation that Marcelo Cabral will have with the panelists in a minute. And I would like to invite you to learn from it, to listen to them, and to connect with us after the panel. Thank you very much.
Sí, te agradecemos, Irene.
Thank you, Irene, for this very interesting special presentation, kicking off this session on Venture for Development, Catalyzing Innovation Across Latin America and the Caribbean. We'll ask the panel to join us. They will talk about how IDB can be a tool for innovation for SMEs and explain how companies can help reestablish engagement in Latin America and the Caribbean. There's great potential here, as Nuria said. The capacity is there. There are opportunities to foster better unicorns in the region. That's part of what we're seeing in this private sector forum where we all meet to take a look at the region's challenges and the various opportunities that we have in connecting public and private sector, opportunities for growth and innovation, and that we have venture and innovation at the service of greater opportunities for everyone. For that, I'll invite to the stage Marcelo Cabral, Chief of Strategy at IDB Lab, who will moderate the next session. We'll also invite our panelists, Camilo Navarro Bustos, co-founder of Wheel the World, Jasmine Gustal Gil, founder and managing partner of iThink VC, and Jose Miguel Benavente, Executive Vice President of the Chilean Economic Development Agency, Corfo. May you all be welcome. Thank you very much. We're delighted to be here. We have a great panel. This will be a conversation. Let us begin then explaining who we are, but especially why we're here. Jose Miguel, out of the gate. I see that you're here, that it's you. Jose Miguel, we're continuing the conversation started in Punta Arenas on the role of public policy and venture and entrepreneurship and how they work. We will talk about venture capital in a minute. We'll talk about startups. But let's talk first about public-private action in this space. Please tell us about Chile's evolution and where you see the future for venture capital policy in Chile. It's an easy question. Well, first of all, thank you very much for the invitation and the opportunity to participate in this panel. When you look at this from the Latin American perspective, you can see that each country has walked down this path at different paces. Some countries are farther ahead than others. The first stage was mainly providing support via financial instruments at the individual level to entrepreneurs who had the possibilities and the ideas with growth potential. And that came to fill a void because traditional banks would never provide financing in those very early stages. That's the 3Fs, friends, family, and fools. That's where they get involved. But then you had angel investors, support for networks, and then there was some direct financing instruments like Startup Chile and others that have emerged. And that was an initial phase. I think many countries are still in that first stage. The second phase was to understand that entrepreneurs in early stages did not just face financial obstacles. There were a series of obstacles that they faced, the part and parcel of entrepreneurship that weren't there. Perhaps I have an idea, perhaps I don't have the contacts or the networks, I don't have access to knowledge, perhaps I don't have access to global markets, etc. So second phase is the development of ecosystems where incubators and accelerators come into play. They don't just deliver technical knowledge, but also the possibility of linking up with all these other players. I think that a number of countries are transitioning into that stage, and the IDB has played an essential role there. I would say the third stage that we're in the midst of now is looking the types of ventures that we're supporting more carefully. Public policy in our country has been quite neutral. It hasn't really prioritized a certain technology or area. And what we've learned from Colombia and Mexico's experience, you see that these instruments have created a positive bias for digital ventures, so not labor intensive or capital intensive, but computer intensive, processing intensive, algorithm intensive. Many of the examples that we have in Chile, we see many of these companies that are linked to this type of tool. Notco, the famous Chilean company, is supported by a principle of AI algorithms. And so what we're considering now is how we can support other types of ventures that have a science and tech base. These are different in nature. They do require physical infrastructure, laboratories that are expensive. These are longer-term projects because in the digital domain, you can change a code or cut new code from one to the other. In laboratories, you can take months, even years to create innovation. In this type of ventures, your clients are few, in contrast with others that had thousands of users. In some cases, users one or two. And the benefit of that is oftentimes those few consumers are inside your country. And that's the stage that we're in Chile. It's an evolution stage. Jose Miguel, to look at this regional, we always have this linear progress, phase one, phase two, phase three. Are there any shortcuts? And we always talk about leapfrogging, but are there shortcuts? Yes, there are shortcuts when the state takes a proactive role, and the government can observe and harness its comparative and competitive advantages. Latin America hasn't done it. Brazil, maybe at some point on a limited basis, but Asian countries were great at this. They directed ventures and investment in specific areas from the government. To do this in a directed way, you need skills and capacity within the government apparatus, which are sophisticated, and many of our countries do not have those skills in the administration. So that is a challenge. It's not just the evolution process from the development side. In this case, we have entrepreneurs in different dimensions, but you need to also see an evolution in the public administration and the capacities that you need within the administration, not the government, within the administration, to see how that can also evolve. Camilo. Two questions. First, what do you think about what Jose Miguel just said? And tell us about principles on Startup Chile. And then you can complete the second assignment. Tell us your perspective from a startup that is working nationally and globally. I fully agree with what you said, Jose Miguel. Startup Chile was a very important instrument in the creation of our company. We benefited from everything that you mentioned. To work in a discipline is a track that we don't necessarily have in our academic systems. There's no clear way through academia to become an entrepreneur, and Startup Chile provided those tools. They showed us how to make a pitch, how to present the company, how to estimate our potential market, how to think about things in a strategic way, and that was essential support. And I believe that in order to build a dynamic venture system, you need three main stakeholders. On the one hand, you need to have entrepreneurs who ultimately are the ones that can take on these solutions. They solve problems. They understand what problems they want to address. You also have investors who are essential to provide the necessary capital to solve these problems, because these problems cannot be solved without capital. There are many of these efforts that require capital, and there's a third one that needs to articulate this and foster this and articulate it, and I believe that Corfo Startup Chile has been able to push this in an incredible way in Chile. I've been in San Francisco for 8 years, and Startup Chile is renowned. It's an accelerator, an incubator that people pay attention to. And to put Chile on the radar as a place where you could have ventures, where you could develop technology, innovation, it also creates dynamism. There are a number of startups in the United States that are hiring talent from Chile. And in the end, it's been a result of the creation of this movement. And if you look at this not from the perspective of a snapshot of what is happening today, we need to see how this is going to be projected 10, 20 years down the road. Indeed, technological work, digitalization will be increasingly relevant in the future, and therefore the work that has been completed is extremely positive. Camilo. Let us take a step back. Do you want my story? Yes, but I see Jasmine is holding up her hand. Well, Startup Chile began its work in Silicon Valley. The first board was made up of Silicon Valley or Stanford professionals, and that's what's ensured that it's existed across administrations. Let's move past public policy now. I want to talk about the micro level. Where does your company come from? How does it emerge? And the challenge that I presented at the beginning. It's a social entrepreneurship company that at the same time is good business. Well, I am the co-founder of Wheel the World. It's an online platform that allows people with disabilities and seniors to reserve hotels and activities throughout the world. It provides a seal of certification to hotels and tour operators so that they can be more inclusive. It's been a crazy journey. My best friend was in an accident when he was a teenager, and he was left in a wheelchair, and that's when we realized that the world is not available for people with disabilities. There are not many facilities that are designed for people with disabilities so that they can engage and interact with those products and services. Obviously, it was harder on him than me, but many years back, we thought we would pursue this initiative in Chilean Patagonia. It was very difficult. We were going on this trip, and we realized that nobody had done it in these circumstances. There was no information on how to explore this place, that you needed a special wheelchair with a single wheel. We didn't know where to stay, how accessible the hotels were in the Patagonia, how we could move around. there was no information available on any of that. And during that planning process, there was a hotel that reached out, and we decided to make an online guide. We had no aspirations of creating a company. We simply wanted to write a blog on how you could explore Torres del Paine with somebody in a wheelchair. We made that journey, and it was a viral story. We were the first to do the W circuit with a person in a wheelchair, and subsequently my partner and I went to the United States. We started studying, but we didn't really study much because the viralization of the story led to hundreds of people reaching out to us to replicate that journey. And hundreds of hotels reached out, and I said, well, why don't we do the same thing in New York, in Washington, in Santiago, Tokyo, London? And that's when we realized that the opportunity was enormous. And as we studied, we looked into it, and we realized that 15% of global population lives with disabilities, and people with disabilities in the United States are spending $23 billion on tourism, and 80% of them have terrible experiences. Just imagine that you're coming from different parts of the world, you come to a hotel, and you start walking around the hotel, and you realize that the floor is sticky, that you can't walk, there's furniture that is in the way of your movement, the bed is so high that you have to climb up to it, you want to go to the restroom, and you can't even open the door because the knob is too high. Wheelchair users sometimes can't move around in hotels because the carpet is too thick. They can't go up to the beds because they're too high. Sometimes the showers have gaps that are too small and they can't go into it. So that is how we founded Wheel the World, to ensure that millions of people can travel to different places. More than 20,000 people have traveled with us, and 5,000 operators and hotels are certified in our platform. I'll go back to those billions, but I want to follow up on that. And now, Jasmine, you have an important role in this panel to tell us how an investment fund that emerges from in a nascent ecosystem. It's a system where you don't have maturity of companies. The deal flow is not there. How is that fund conceived, and how can it be in touch with other nascent systems? We always think that investment is concentrated in large cities and large countries in terms of the size of the population, the economy. Let's start with that. In order to respond to the question, I need to tell you how and why this initiative emerged. I'm delighted to be here in the annual meetings. This was my past life. I was the Vice Minister of Economic Planning in Paraguay, and I worked at the Central Bank. So I had to join my authorities attending these meetings, so I feel right at home. But in 2016, thanks to a scholarship from the government of Paraguay, I had the opportunity to pursue an MBA in Stanford University. And to me, the idea behind that MBA was, when I come back, I'll be Minister of the Economy, or I wanted to be a senator. And from conversations and classes and everything I read back then, I realized that there was the need to have innovation, technology, and science policies at the core of public policy, and also to look at global innovation, where we observe that countries that make most progress are the ones that have science, technology, and innovation at the core of the public policies. And look at that, I wrote my thesis summarizing everything that's happened in Latin America and the Caribbean, and we looked at Corfo, ANI in Uruguay, Colombia, Peru, and I realized that my country was lagging behind in terms of innovation policies. So when I returned, we passed bills, we created the innovation unit. These things are moving apace. We are supporting 150 entrepreneurs with a technological base, and since we've made progress and had results, thanks to the support of the IDB and other organizations like CAF and World Bank, we went to other countries, and I could see how those entrepreneurs with the tech base that began in Paraguay, Ecuador, and Bolivia, had the same talent the Colombian, Chilean, Mexican entrepreneurs, or from any part of the world, had. The talent, the entrepreneurial talent, is equally distributed across the world, up until the smallest, most remote city of Latin America and the Caribbean. But the opportunities are not there in every place. And so I started thinking about what we could do differently to provide these opportunities to these entrepreneurs. And as you said, Marcelo, to work with people in emerging countries or that had emerging ecosystems, and to become that first VC funds that would get involved after friends and family, after Corfo has provided the grant, and to help them scale up quickly, to scale up to other countries, to give them the seal of approval, to endorse them so that other funds can then make investments in those ventures. That's how I think VC came up. It's a $13 million fund that seeks to identify exceptional entrepreneurs in Latin America, the Caribbean, that are addressing structural problems in our region through technology, with a special focus to find these very hidden treasures in countries like Ecuador, Paraguay, Bolivia, Uruguay, and Peru.
And I can say that IDB Lab is really pleased to have been partnered with you and to be part of that. The question was always whether that was sustainable, how long it would take, and how can we use a regional approach. And so, you're talking about really relatively small markets, and yes, the talent is equally distributed, but the population or the market or the talent or the infrastructure have the same distribution. And so, what do you do going forward? Well, as an answer and as a good economist, I'll give you some numbers. The venture capital industry in Latin America started 15 years ago. It's a very, very new industry. From all the investment going to startups in the world, only 15% goes to Latin America. So again, it's a very recent, and Latin America as a region is also emerging as part of that ecosystem. If you zoom in to understand how we're doing now and where we are, of that sitting not 15 but 5%, I would say about 75% of that 5% goes to two countries, primarily Brazil, 60%, and Mexico as the second country. And then the rest of the pie goes to Chile, Colombia, Argentina, and so on. And then you have the rest of the countries in Latin America. That's where things are right now. But again, if you zoom in again to see what growth was in each region, Brazil over the last 5 years grew by 200% in VC investment, venture capital. Colombia, which has transformed really quickly, it had 5,000% growth over the last 5 years. And so, okay, you're looking at the indicators. So now you're thinking, what's going to be the next Colombia? Where's there's going to be that exponential growth in per capita income and investment? We had the explanation of what's happening here. When you have a venture trying to get the work off the ground and export it, instead of having to go through all these different channels, things need to move very quickly. And if we think about the numbers of what this progress looked like in each of the countries, that is where you start to see these specific countries where there is a great opportunity to be the first fund to tap into that talent, and I think that's how we get there. Thank you very much, Jose Miguel. Irene was just showing how investment had evolved in this area. We saw a lot of volatility. So the first question is that volatility concerning? And the second is, listening to Jasmine's numbers, how can we increase investment in this area? And please, if you can think about this from a regional perspective and help us put together that package. Well, what a question. Well, I would say that volatility is not the cause, it's the result. in a way, it's the result of trying to push things in the given context where it happens. But sometimes we need to think about not only what the different components are and the barriers. Financing is one of them. It's important, of course, to address that, but create opportunities so that there can be more of what's called a deal flow for projects. And so that's the comprehensive view that public policy needs to take into account. Financial issues and financing issues. Again, there have been changes there, evolutions, increase in VC. Corfo had been part of over 70 different VC funds, but now it's moving to a different branch, which is a fund of funds. That doesn't exist in Chile, and that's a mechanism that can increase the offering so that there can be interagency institutions. I'm sorry, but there's a lot of inertia in public policy, and so you're moving away from that. Is that what you're saying? Can you delve a little bit deeper into that? What does that mean? What does it mean to withdraw from that? And, usually it's not that easy to remove yourself from something that's already doing well. So can you explain? Well, sure, I'll explain a little bit. I think it's really important when you have an external assessment in terms of how things are moving, when you have policies that are based not only on external evaluation, but also on principles that can be found in literature. Unfortunately, I come from academia, and I was there for 30 years, and so you see a lot of that evolution. Funds nowadays have reached a certain level of maturity. It's not that the VC funds are going to disappear. The idea is understanding whether the government needs those VC funds. There are evaluations that have been conducted by several institutions. IDB is one of them, and they have pretty much given a thumbs up to what's been done with these funds. But now we need to move forward with something else, and a fund of funds is that next step. And so the idea is to find the right instruments to make that happen. The main idea is to understanding that increasing the offerings with, say, pension funds and other funds, you can start to have more investment going into these fund of funds. But we need to also remember that talent can be everywhere, and it really is everywhere, but it needs to come together for these things to really take off. And so in a way, you need to open up the playing field so that there can be more players when you're looking for new ideas. What have we done? We did it through a very simple approach. We had all the different national candidates, is what we call them. And so you had certain applications that went out for who was going to benefit from the different branches. And then a lot of these ideas would flow through that arrangement. But right now we have 20 instruments to support innovation and entrepreneurship to the region. And now the entrepreneurship decisions are taking place in a different part of that system. And so the playing field is now more open so that those who would fall out of being able to access domestic resources can now try again, but going for regional resources. So there's a big leap there. Yes, there is a big leap, but I think that it reflects, as I see it, the consistency in public policy by taking a more dynamic approach. And so I wouldn't be concerned by the volatility. There are exogenous shocks and things happening and decisions made by family offices and VC funds. But what we do need to do is try to ensure that you're looking at things not only from a financing perspective, but also a talent perspective. And I'll conclude with this with one more point. There is a problem in how startup financing markets work, at least in Chile. If you go to the US and other places, you see that this is how it goes. And since you've experienced this in the US, please correct me if I'm wrong. VC funds and investors tend to go knock on the doors of the entrepreneurs. In Latin America is the exact opposite. The entrepreneurs are going around knocking doors. And so we have the problem with finance offering, with the amount of talent And in this, when you think about a benchmark like the U.S., I think that is what can help inform public policy, not only when it comes to these opportunities for improved deal flow of ideas, but also having more resources available. And it is not only about having equity through traditional mechanisms. For example, the bank has a number of new initiatives that it is taking on, and that helps with tapping into the talent I was talking about, but also understanding all of the different possibilities for financing that exist and how to use that to scale your business. Camilo, if I can just give you 1 minute to think about that, and then want to go back to the earlier question. Yes, there are investors in the U.S. who go around knocking doors, and I actually had experiences firsthand coming to an event like this and would get off of the stage and had investors come to me and say, I want to invest in your business. And a week later, the money is there. It's in the bank account. And these things I didn't believe would happen, and then I started to experience it. And we see that also with investors like Jillian Tanska, for example, who is the ex-CEO of Booking.com. We had a great opportunity of having her invest in our company, and the senior executives at Netflix, the same thing. And you're right, they write to us. They say, hey, I'm interested in your business. Can I invest? It happens. Camilo, you talked about 15% of the population that are perhaps, 1 billion people around the world. But for IDB Lab, it's really important to figure out how to reach those who have less, who have the biggest needs. That's been the challenge. So can you tell us how companies like yours are able to find a way to get the benefits to actually reach people who are hard to reach, are out of the regular networks, those who really need it the most? Well, we are fully convinced that the world is moving towards being 100% accessible. The main reason why this is going to happen, and this is going to be across the board, independent of income status, is that we are all going to be part of the aging population, and that's going to lead to some sort of disability. And disability is something that brings a lot of people together and creates a very specific need. So how can you reach those who have fewer resources? I think that as a business, we need to focus. We are focused on going market to market, finding a way to have an impact on everyone in the best way possible. But we do currently need to concentrate on something to be a starting point. We're starting with U.S. citizens traveling through our platform. We've found a good approach there. But as we grow as a company, we want to have an impact not only on the folks who don't have the resources. My dream would be for information, for the data that we are gathering to be deployed through Google Maps. So anyone wanting to go anywhere could know exactly what they're going to see there. You don't necessarily need to book something or pay for something, but actually have this data benefit everyone and make it more accessible. Say, for example, I don't want to make anyone feel bad, but I don't see a ramp on this stage. And that's an example of something that needs to change, and we need more awareness around that. I know we need to take it one step at a time, and that's what we've been doing, just focusing on it one market at a time. Well, thank you. I also asked earlier about mature and less mature markets. And let me pivot just a little bit and talk about technology, especially AI, and what your take is on this pervasive idea that now everyone just talks about AI and the need to invest in that. And that's the first question. The second has to do with what Camila was just saying. Where do you see the opportunities for better investment, for inclusion, but also for good for business investments when you want to make sure that your deal flow is doing what it needs to do? Well, let me start with AI. Of course, everyone is talking about AI, but that's really been around for 20 years. I think that what happened over the last couple of years is that thanks to ChatGPT and technologies alike, it now is within everyone's reach. We now talk about AI. In about 3 years, we're going to be talking about quantum computing. And there's always going to be some cutting-edge technology that will be the talk of the town. And when you hear so much talk about anything, I think that you need to look deeper when you want to really think about this issue. And it's happened thousands of times to me. Just looking at a business, for example, that was doing software for micro businesses, for inventory management. And I would ask questions about the tech being used, if they used AI. And then the next day, on their website, you would see AI-powered platform for micro entrepreneurs, just because they wanted to get the AI out there somewhere. But it doesn't necessarily mean that they're using AI. In Miami, I remember one of the talks that we had as funds was how to determine whether a business is truly using this technology and what the red flags are and what you should look for when you don't have that much time to dig in. So what's the main question? Well, one thing is, for example, somebody says, well, we use AI. But it's just an API that can connect to ChatGPT and uses that information really quickly for a bot that can answer a question. And that can be increasingly expensive because for every token, that cost can really rise. And then you need to start thinking about the algorithms that can help with that. And so that's something to be aware of. And of course, if a business is not using AI at all, I think they're wasting time. When you look at fintech and B2B and e-commerce, at some point these technologies have to use AI because it's now available for all. But that doesn't mean that that is going to be the solution to every problem and that there isn't another technology that can really fix your problem, say quantum computing, like we see in other areas that could be more relevant. And remember your second question? It mainly had to do with good business and social inclusion and what the investment theory on that is. Well, there are several investment funds and they all have their investment thesis. It doesn't mean that there are some that are good and others bad. There are some funds that only invest on biotechnology and others on health tech and finance, etc. And there are other funds, like ours, that focus on investing in businesses that, through technology, can solve systemic issues in the region. And we went that route for two reasons. One, that's because Juan Cruz and I, Juan Cruz, my partner, decided to be angel investors, and this was 15 years ago. And we decided that that is where our heart was. If we want to have a venture capital fund, it should be to use technology for good. And the second thing has to do with the fantastic business opportunity. In Latin America, there are a lot of problems: the lack of financial inclusion, public transportation, mobility, e-mobility, climate. And the government, this is something else I learned here, the government cannot solve everything. The government has to create mechanisms for the private sector to step up and help solve these problems. We have scalable technologies that are ready to go right now, ready to be deployed. And there are a lot of business opportunities in Latin America if you can really tap into that. Great, thank you very much. We have 2 minutes, 30 seconds left. According to what I'm seeing, and I can see that because the numbers are so large. Jose Miguel, what is your takeaway from this discussion that you feel like you didn't know before or something that really caught your attention? And I'll ask all three of you the same question. So can you just give us your thoughts, 1 minute? What really got your gears turning? Well, your comment about the role that government should play, and that is that the government can't do it all, and so the private sector has to do some of it. In some countries, one of the challenges has been that that was always taken for granted. And so in a way, the idea is to have government be part of the driving promotional force for the private sector and entrepreneurship, and how that can be the solution to a number of problems. That really struck me because, at least in Chile, there's always been this vision that these things go hand in hand. So it's more about complementarity and not replacement. Of course, the government is responsible for social goods, etc., and that's a big discussion. But there's also the idea of the pyramid. There are some things that can be addressed based on basic needs, and others that have to do with how to let entrepreneurship take the lead. And again, the work here needs to be complementary. On the one hand, you can have instruments and public policy, and on the others, you can have the scale and the networks, etc. Something that Camilo said that also struck me was, what would I call it? I would say the appreciation we heard in his stories for support from the public sector. And I think that's a great signal in how important it has been to recognize that as well. Camilo, same question? Same question. I think that we're all after the same thing, how to solve problems. And I hope that this endless pursuit of solutions to these problems can lead us to also identify what's a major problem and what's not a major problem. I think that in an economy, in a society, we all need to work together to take on these major challenges and have a vision around the fact that when those problems are resolved, that's for the benefit of everyone. And that should be the obsession, the focus. We need more entrepreneurs. We need for the entrepreneurs to be better prepared. Many times I hear that there's a lack of access to finance and capital for entrepreneurs. Like, yes, sure. But we should also have the same effort going to the skills for those who are going to create that access to capital. So making sure that the opportunities are there because there are more folks working on making that access possible and have that reach more people. When the government also moves in this direction, in the end, who wins? Everyone. Thank you very much. Hazmin, last but not least. Sure, yes. I mean, this is a private sector forum here for the annual meetings. And as I was looking at people out in the audience, I was thinking, maybe you are looking to understand how all of your businesses can either have support or provide support, and how does this relate to my day-to-day. And we were talking about how to invest in startups and what a business leader can do in how to best work with other companies. Many times the idea of innovating within your business is an increasingly less popular idea because it calls for a lot of time, a lot of resources. But when you have entrepreneurs like Camilo and you have ventures that can solve problems for Latin America, the only way they can grow is if they work with companies. And so I would encourage you all to have open innovation, to work with entrepreneurs and business leaders, work with startups. And you know what? Why not? Become angel investors, invest in these funds, and encourage you to just be more deeply embedded in this ecosystem. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you, Marcelo, for this panel, and thank you to the panelists as well for the very inspiring thoughts that we've heard here, especially as we think about entrepreneurship, innovation, and how they can be key drivers of development in Latin America. What we also saw in the end is that startups and ventures and inclusion, in the end, that creates opportunities for all. And the major challenge we are going to address in the next panel has to do with attracting investment for growth and development in Latin America and the Caribbean. And we also remember what Camilo mentioned about his happenstance path towards the host of opportunities that eventually came his way. And again, as he was saying, and this has been said by others, unfortunately, entrepreneurs have been the ones who have to go around, knock on doors, but hopefully there can be a reversing of that trend and having the investors come to the entrepreneurs. And so again, we'll continue with our program, continuing to hear inspiring ideas. We are going to begin our final panel. I know a lot of expectation around it, and this is because it has to do with what we're talking about, opportunities for investment in Latin America and the Caribbean. First, we are going to offer the stage to Carla Flores, who is the Executive Director of Invest Chile. She will be the moderator for this panel. And our panelists, Diego Pardo, Minister of Energy of the Chilean government, Michael Payawar, Executive Vice President of the Milken Institute Finance, Renee Muga, the VP of Corporate Affairs, BHP, and Niklaus Eggenberger, Manager of the Strategic Planning and Performance Department in the Qatar Fund for Development. Welcome to all panelists.
Muy buenos días a todos y todas.
Good morning, everyone. Just wanted to thank you all for this opportunity to have a conversation. Just a few days ago, I was a moderator for a panel at a side event in Magallanes. And part of that conversation with international organizations like the IDB and OECD was a focus, but also with the private sector. And we were discussing how governments and agencies and organizations can drive the necessary investment for quality jobs, but also to boost growth and speed up development in key industries for the economy and for taking on global challenges. And therefore, how governments can also handle the exigencies of our time, fiscal deficits, and other cross-cutting challenges in the region, how to ensure that there is a fostering of an enabling environment, but also how to maximize the impact of these investments for the biggest impact on the people. We all know that foreign investment can help our countries import innovation, new ways of doing business, and access to markets. But there are also goals that we need to take into account. It is important as we think about this challenge to think about the role of financial institutions, access to financing, and that's part of what we will discuss today. Latin America and the Caribbean is a region with endless opportunities. Endless opportunities in key sectors for the energy transition, clean energy, and critical minerals, among others. But of course, for these opportunities to turn into something, there's a need for financing. And so one of the questions is, how can we make sure that these financial resources can reach these opportunities? To kick off this discussion, we have Minister Pardo. We'll start with you with our first question. The question is, how has the capital market contributed to the energy transition? And wondering if you can tell us a little bit about the significant role played in stabilizing prices.
Gracias, Carla. Saludar a todos los que nos acompañan hoy.
Thank you, Susana.
Capitales típicamente cumple dos funciones.
Thank you for having us today. Capital markets fulfill two main functions. The first one is that they deliver financing, enabling countries to organize their flows along a time horizon that is best suited to the objectives we have. When we talk about rate adjustments, we need to make sure that self-financing conditions continue to be met, ensuring that there's not great shocks that will bankrupt companies or lead to arrears with companies. That is what lies behind mechanisms such as this. Second one is that capital markets also deliver market signals that let us know how we're doing. We just closed a couple of weeks ago the final financing tranche of the rate process in Chile that has come to an end, fortunately. And when we look at the market, the signals that the market's sending, in the latest funding round, we had 20 PBs under the previous round, which in turn was 30 PBs or BPs under the first one. This shows that in general terms, when you look at debt capital markets, there's great trust in the process that Chile is pursuing, and that is extremely positive because efforts were not easy. We had to follow three processes for rate stabilization, and the fact that we have this level of trust in the market is a testament to how effective the process was. And I'll take a couple minutes in explaining why the IDB has been key in this process. IDB has two parts. It has IDB Invest, which is the financial branch of the bank, acts as intermediaries in the financial process, but they also have a public sector side. And to understand how important its role has been in this process, we need to understand that Chile decided to freeze its rates in 2019, October 2019, in the midst of social conflict. And with Outlook, this would self-adjust, that it was a temporary rate increase, and then it would just freeze most expensive contracts in a time horizon of 3 months, and the only thing you had to subsidize was that time lag. That did not come to be, obviously, because the exchange rate and macro conditions changed during social unrest. Then we had the pandemic, and especially because fossil fuels had a very high increase in a short period of time. So that was the first stage. Then we had a second stage. This unfolded during 2022. It was very cumbersome. I was responsible for its implementation. And therein, the financial mechanism followed too many processes that were bureaucratic. So each emission would take 18 months, so the different stepping stones that were required to stabilize the rates would set us on a financial spiral that we would have a difficult time overcoming. The third process was simple. It was much more conservative, and the model that implements it, and that is why we have been able to successfully complete it. But to that end, we had to follow three different processes, and in 6 months have the 3 rate adjustments, 2 issuances, a request for electric power subsidy that supports 2 million households. We did that all in 3 months. That was only possible because multilateral banks are able to become a country's institutional memory. And in the case of the IDB and its relationship with Chile, this is quite true. They all participated in all 3 processes, PEC 1, PEC 2, and PEC 3, and they've also have participated in public service subsidy efforts in other parts of the world. So their support and the design and streamlining of all the administrative processes and making sure that the policy has the shortest span to reach a solution is key. So capital markets ensure that the rate stabilization process follows a reasonable sequence. The public sector side of the IDB was also instrumental in this exercise as the institutional memory here in Chile and other countries in Latin America and the Caribbean. It was able to generate effective policies. This helped us ensure that this process was short in time and effective in its implementation. Thank you. Thank you very much, Minister. I will be very concise with this panel. We have a few minutes left. I know that many of you were thinking about lunch, so I'll cut straight to the point.
The defining factors that shape investment trends in Latin America and the Caribbean over the next decade, and how should government and private sector players prepare?
Great, thank you. Thank you to IDB for inviting me here to speak. Before I get into that, I want to do a quick commercial for Chile. At the Milken Institute, every year we come out with something called the Global Opportunity Index, and we look at a number of pieces of data in terms of what are the economic opportunities for countries around the world. And we look at things like human capital development, the legal and regulatory framework, creditors' rights, investors' rights, all of those other things. And when you look at the Latin American and Caribbean region, Chile comes out as number one. And the reason for that is what the minister talked about. They have here in Chile, there's a certain level of trust in the capital markets that is very well deserved. Two areas in which they came out very high was on what we call the institutional framework. These are the regulations and the laws and the creditors' rights that allow and attract investments here in the country, and they come out very, very well. If you think about attracting capital and capital flowing through the economy, the one analogy I like to use is water flowing through a river. And here in Chile, the water is flowing very well. They're attracting investment capital. The other area that Chile stands out very much is financial access. So this is the ability of not just the elites, the top institutions getting access to the financial system, but it flowing down throughout the economy to everyone else. And using the water analogy again, it's a little bit like the tributaries from the river, making sure that it spreads out for everyone. So I wanted to mention that in particular. Congratulations to folks here in Chile. In terms of the answer to your question, what are the big trends that we see for investments in the future? I mean, there's three that we see that have been mentioned a lot over the last few days here. The first is technology and innovation. Obviously, artificial intelligence. It's not just the firms that are actually doing the artificial intelligence. We have seen studies in the United States where any company that experiments with artificial intelligence, whether it's a manufacturing company, an agriculture company, a fintech company, a services company, sees immediate productivity improvements. And so we think that artificial intelligence is going to provide a number of opportunities to enhance productivity and therefore profitability and earnings for companies going forward. The next one is blockchain and cryptocurrency technology. The biggest, I think the immediate impacts we're going to see there is in the issue of stable coins. These are cryptocurrencies that are backed by fiat currencies, and they allow for wholesale, like the banks and also retail individual investors, to move money around the world. In many countries, the amount of remittances that go back to those countries is actually higher than the amount of foreign direct investment. And so what stable coins do is, it's very technical, but it allows for that movement of that money faster and cheaper, and we're going to see those numbers move dramatically over time. A second example I see that in the blockchain technology was back last October, IDB Lab had their IDB Lab Forum in Buenos Aires, and I had the pleasure of moderating a roundtable there, and we saw a lot of neat fintech companies that were in this space. The one that stood out to me, there was a Brazilian company that used the PIX system, which is their blockchain developed by the central bank there, to use in merchants, in stores. But the interesting, which doesn't seem that interesting, but the interesting part of it was using the PIX system for Brazilian tourists in Argentina. So what that says is that if you can develop excellent blockchain technology domestically, the world is truly global, and it's going to come out, and it's going to, and there's a lot of investable opportunities in that space. The second area we see is in climate mitigation and adaptation. There's been a lot talked about over the last couple days on that. But what I would mention here is that last year in Dubai, when they had COP28, what was really striking to me was that for the first time, you had not only participation from governments, but the private sector really came out. And at the Institute, we're very much about, if there's going to be clean technology developed, there's going to be investable opportunities, you really have to have the private sector and the multilateral banks involved in the process. And we're very much looking forward to COP30 in Brazil later this year to talk about investable opportunities. And then the final one I would mention is trade and supply chains, rewiring those. There's a lot of potential investable opportunities in that. Why do I say that? Well, if you look at the past, we had the pandemic. Before the pandemic, the key word in supply chains was efficiency. How do you move things quickly and cheaply throughout the financial system? Then the pandemic hit, we had an exogenous shock, And then the key word was resiliency. You want to build in resiliency to various things. Right now in the present, there's a lot of talk about trade and tariffs and those particular things. Now all of a sudden, people with the tariffs potentially coming in, where in the supply chain are various inputs and are various outputs. And so you want to make sure that your supply chains are resilient to those things. And then in the future, yesterday there was an excellent panel on disaster risks and how you deal with that. We just saw today that in Thailand you have an earthquake. You think about weather or climate-related risks, maybe in critical mineral mining, and you want to think about how your supply chain can be resilient to that, particularly for critical minerals that are going to be used in electronic vehicles and other sort of battery storage opportunities. So let me stop there and thank you.
Muchas gracias, Mike. Voy a pasar.
Thank you very much, Mike. I'll move to Rene Muga, VP of Corporate Affairs at BHP. Given that Chile is a mining superpower, it's an opportunity for Chile and Latin America and the Caribbean and grow demand with critical minerals. And we expect this to be extremely relevant in the upcoming decade. So how can we harness this opportunity? What is missing? And especially, how can we direct these new projects so that in the end, the industry can contribute and have a positive impact in the socioeconomic development of our countries? Thank you very much for this question. We have limited time, so I'll try to summarize my answer. We are facing an enormous opportunity for this region, not just Chile. This region will be the most important supplier of critical minerals, especially copper, which is a central element of the transformation underway. By 2050, in our estimates, you will need 70% more copper than the amounts produced today, which means that every 2 years we will have to uncover a new hidden mine. Or a new mine at the size of the largest mine in the world. So we need a significant amount. And this region produces more than a third of the copper that's produced in the world. There are concrete data that show that most of that new production has great potential to come from this region. There are countries that are producers like Chile and Peru, very important. Each one supply a third of the copper of the world, but there are other countries that also have an enormous potential to participate in this great opportunity. Argentina, we're seeing how Argentina has fostered investment in minerals, particularly in copper, and their announcements were important investments in that region, and they're adjusting their regulation to facilitate that investment. And there are other countries that have proven copper reserves. So the important thing today is to see how we can seize this opportunity. And the point is that this opportunity needs to be seized on before mining project between a discovery exploration and for it to come online. We can take 10, 15 years, and we need to short those terms so that we can face that demand. Why is this important? Because we have competition. Peru had been for years the second copper producer in the world. Now it's the DRC who takes second place, and Peru has shifted to third place. So there are other regions in the world that may have less potential for production but offer better conditions to global companies. Global companies that seek to extract these minerals, seek the best opportunities. We have favorable conditions, but if we're not able to improve conditions and attract those investments, we won't be able to take on that opportunity. We need to reduce processing times for permits. We need to have predictability and stability in the regulatory context. These are essential for capital-intensive, high-scale investments such as mining, and we require long-term certainty. Service delivery, transportation are also important. We need to have efficiency, greater productivity. We need to have higher skilled workers, an environment that at large would enable mining to continue to evolve in the context of this phenomenon. And to make sure that mining becomes a modern industry, even though in people's perception it's always been a traditional industry. But recently we have included innovation, AI, other technologies into mining. These are all elements that are central to mining, but mining is also an engine that leads to productive linkages such as no other industry in the region, and it has the great ability to leverage and support economic and social development, given its dimensions and its ability to involve broader linkages. If we seize on this opportunity, we will contribute to the development of the mining sector, but beyond that, we'll be able to contribute to development at large like no other sector is in a position to in Latin America and the Caribbean. Thank you, René. Good news if we think about institutional strength and everything that Mike was commenting on. There are cutting-edge sectors in our countries. There are other initiatives that seek to streamline the development of these projects in the region. So there is a very positive outlook.
Focus on humanitarian and development aid, but we're seeing an increasing emphasis on impact-driven investment. How does QFFD's evolving strategy align with the investment landscape in Latin America and the Caribbean, and what opportunities do you see for collaboration with BidInvest, for example?
Yeah, thank you so much, Carla, for this question, and thank you so much for having me representing here the Qatar Fund for Development, and thank you for contributing to this, being able to contribute to this very important discussions here. Yeah, yes, just, I mean, your observation is perfectly right? I mean, we are aiming at moving, you know, from aid development cooperation more towards impact-driven investment. However, this of course does not mean that we deviate from our main purpose, you know, which is to contribute to the SDGs, to sustainable development goals, you know, or to prevent and alleviate also suffering from humanitarian crisis and having impact in whatever we do, right? Irrespective of the development finance tools that we apply. What is new, you know, is really that we want to diversify our development finance modalities and go beyond grant. You know, so far 95% of our expenditures have been grant-based, you know, and now, you know, in the mid-longer term, you know, we want to bring it down to 20%, you know, and 80% is, you know, concessional loans, impact investment, bonds, guarantees, etc. So if we look at the triple bottom line of impact investment, you know, which is, with its focus on, you know, profit, people, and planet, you know, the stronger focus that we want to have is actually on financial sustainability, meaning that you know, our benefits that we generate, you know, that they're really sustained, you know, through using the right financing modalities in the right context and creating actually viable markets, or supporting where they are already, you know, or supporting viable markets and longer term transformative change. Blended finance, of course, plays a very particular role in our new strategy, you know, mainly if we look at, you know, the figures speak for themselves actually, you know, if you look at, you know, the annual official development assistance, you know, that's the amount that spent by donor countries on an annual basis, which they report to the OECD, you know, it oscillates around $200 billion USD per year. If we look at the needs, you know, that are there, there, to achieve the SDGs by 2030, which amount to approximately 4.2 trillion USD per year, and only 17% of the SDG goals are actually on progress to be achieved by 2030. So there's an obvious, very huge gap, and this offers a huge potential, for pension funds, commercial banks, private impact investors, to come in. Why don't they come in often? Because it's risky, right? There are economic, political, financial, natural hazards that pose risks, and that's exactly where sovereign partners like us, Qatar, or multilateral development banks like IDB, or ideally, of course, both together, jointly, to have more impact, can come together to de-risk. So that's the purpose, and if we look at, we have seen it, from our previous speakers, the vital transformations that are ongoing in Latin America, and I've just read a recent report by Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean, seeing 3 vital transformations, towards a new development model. One is, to move towards higher sustained, inclusive, sustainable growth, higher productivity. Second one is reducing inequality, foster inclusion, social mobility. Third one is boosting sustainability and combating climate change. So when looking at these 3 transformations and the key challenges, possible solutions relating to slower than expected growth, lower productivity, limited access also to risk capital, limited access to finance. I think this is really about investments, right? That's not about charity. That's about investments, that's about creating markets, right? Viable markets, and there is where the private sector really plays an important role, and which opens a lot of possibilities also for private-public partnerships, and where people like us, sovereign funds, development funds or MDBs, like the IDB, can come in additionally, and support this kind of investment. So for us, IDB Invest is actually an ideal partner, for us, for Qatar Fund for Development in this region, helping to bridge needs from the region, originating from the region with investors, and we have identified more or less 3 key aspects or pillars where we could come in. The one is co-investments in impact-driven funds and projects, where we can leverage our capital with IDB's investment, IDB Investment's regional expertise, where we can prioritize high-impact sectors like women-led SMEs, for example, renewable energy, green, resilient infrastructure, which offers a lot of opportunities for public-private partnerships, or inclusive healthcare solutions, climate-smart agriculture, for example. That's number one. A second one could be, as said, blended finance to de-risk private investments that can comprise insurance-based financial instruments, climate risk bonds, catastrophe bonds for climate adaptation. And the third one, because investments should usually not go alone, right? To also invest in knowledge exchange, capacity building, technical assistance to make sure that, that there's long-term sustainability actually when we look at investments. Thank you so much.
Muchas gracias, Niklaus.
Thank you, Niklaus. We are bringing this panel to an end. I want to close with a comment on what's been discussed here, but also what's been discussed throughout the morning in this private sector forum, and on the need to link multilateral banks and great investment funds with companies and with governments, so necessary measures are undertaken to foster the necessary actions to create enabling conditions and conditions that will lead to positive impacts on people who are the ultimate beneficiaries of these investments. Thank you to the panelists.
Agradecemos.
We thank Carla for moderating this panel, and we thank all the panelists for their contributions. We thank you all for being with us here today in the room and online via streaming. With that, we bring this forum to an end. It was a pleasure to have been your hosts over the course of the last 3 days. We hope that they have been fruitful, full of opportunities. We hope you enjoy Chile. Thank you very much. Best of success.